and everybody's here. Good to go. 1 second. Let me make sure we're going.
Says it's streaming.
I'm just waiting to check it right now. Okay.
All right, are we ready?
Yep.
Excellent. So this is the August 25th meeting of the City of Ithaca Planning and Development Board. Why don't we start with introductions? I'm Rob Lewis, and I guess we can't really go around the room. But Mackenzie, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, everybody. Mackenzie Jones, Vice Chair of the Planning Board.
And Mitch?
Mitch Glass, member of the board.
Emily?
Emily Petrina, member of the board.
CJ?
CJ Randall, member of the board.
Garrick?
Garrick Blaylock, a member of the board and liaison to the board.
Elizabeth? Oh, sorry. I apologize, Garrick. You're also super faint. I don't know if there's anything to be done about that.
Yeah, I think I got the wrong mic enabled. I'm Garrick Blaylock, member of the board and liaison to the Board of Public Works, and I'll fix the mic.
Thanks, Garrick. Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Godden, a member of the board. Is this when I recuse myself or later?
Whenever the things coming up that you're recusing yourself from, that would be the time, I believe.
Why don't you make
Anya?
time for that at the beginning? Yeah,
Sure.
of each project. Yeah.
Sure.
I'm Lisa Nicholas. I'm a Deputy Director of Planning and staff to the Planning Board. Anya?
Thank you, Lisa. Anya?
I'm Anya Harris, City of Ithaca staff.
And that is the game. So
Rob,
if
can I
you're
just
seeing this, you are probably watching this on the city's YouTube channel, which is the place to watch it. If you want, the only people who will be let into the actual Zoom meeting are members of the public wishing to speak at a public hearing. And to do that, you communicate via email to the planning department, planning staff. And then people who are actually applicants before the board. If you are an applicant or a person waiting to speak at a public hearing, you'll be let in from the waiting room at the appropriate time. And during privilege of the floor, we'll read any comments that have been submitted in advance, and those comments will have a normal 3-minute limit. With that, I believe we're ready for agenda review. Lisa, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Great. Well, that's nice and simple. Next up would be public comments. Lisa, what do we have?
I have one public comment to read. Anya, can you time me? It looks like it might be longer than 3 minutes.
Okay.
It's from Paul Fairbanks on behalf of the Friends of Newman Golf Course concerning City Harbor. Friends of Newman Golf Course, as Friends of Newman, has been closely following the development surrounding the City Harbor project. As City Harbor's nearest neighbor, the golf course has a vested interest in seeing how this plan will ultimately be implemented. Along with preserving, promoting, and enhancing the course, we hope to make Newman more useful to our citizens and more profitable to the city. As many of you know, Friends of Newman was instrumental in calling attention to the fact that the turnaround plan for the project encroaches on the 9th green to such an extent that it necessitates the relocation of the green approximately 70 to 80 yards north of its current location. It is our understanding that developers have agreed to cover the cost of those relocation efforts, although we don't know if that agreement has been formalized. Perhaps this is something for your committee to consider. We know the golfing public would like some assurance about this. Is the city taking formal steps to secure an agreement about this? A larger part of our interest in this project has to do with the stated intention to build a new community center that would provide services to both the golfing and boating public. We support the concept of a shared community center and see it as an important feature in the overall project. Such a community center has the potential to attract more year-round activity and in and around Newman, and would be tremendous improvement over the current 80-year-old clubhouse that appears to be in need of extensive maintenance. Over the past months, we have asked both the city and City Harbor development team several questions about the community center project. To date, we have yet to hear anything definitive regarding the actual construction plans, building ownership, and overall management of the space. Some of our questions include: who will cover the cost of the design and construction? Who will own the building and who will operate the facility? How will the construction be funded if the city is responsible for construction costs? Will it require a bond initiative? Is the city considering any alternatives such as intensive renovations to the current clubhouse? How will various stakeholders, golfers, boaters, hikers be included in the decision-making process? Will there be community forums to help create the design and plans? Will the center be open year-round to provide a meeting space, musical entertainment, special lectures, as well as food and beverage? How will the city and developers resolve the many issues that surround this component of the project? Where exactly will the new community center be located on the course? Does the plan continue to be situated on the site of the old ninth green? Friends of Newman would welcome the opportunity to share our perspective and thoughts about this exciting proposal. Perhaps our questions are a bit premature, but we believe the community center needs to be carefully planned as it is likely to serve as a key component to the golf course's future. Planning for this project will be complex and time consuming, but we also believe it's wise to start thinking about it sooner rather than later. We are very interested in this project and we are willing and able to commit time and energy when the appropriate time comes. Thank you for your time and consideration. Paul Fairbanks on behalf of Friends of Newman Golf Course.
All right, under 3 minutes.
Oh.
So the next item on the agenda would be board response to public comment. I will say that I don't have a response to that, but if there's any member of the board that wishes to respond, I'd be happy to recognize you to do so. Seeing none. Next up is subdivision review for a minor subdivision in the Chainworks district at 620 South Aurora Street. So let's bring the applicants in.
I believe we have Sarah Spencer from Harris Beach.
CJ?
Yes, I just want to say that the firm that I own used to be part of the design team for this project, so I'm going to go ahead and recuse myself from duties related to this particular project.
Thank you very much. And I think the way we're handling recusals is that you leave the Zoom meeting and then either Anya or Lisa text you when it's time to come back in.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Sarah, is there anybody else from your team who'll be joining us?
It's just me tonight.
Great. So our actions tonight are public hearing and then consideration of preliminary and final subdivision approval. Take it away and tell us a little bit about what we're looking at.
Okay. Good evening, members of the planning board, Lisa, Anya. My name is Sarah Spencer. I'm from Harris Beach on behalf of Sub 15 LLC. They are the current owner of the property, and it's approximately 96 acres. And the proposal is to subdivide it into two separate parcels. One that is approximately 0.897 acres, referred to as parcel OU-1. And then a second parcel, which is approximately 95 acres, which is OU-2. And Emerson plans to retain the smaller parcel to complete environmental remediation on site. There's some underground storage tanks, things of that nature, and eventually convey the second larger parcel for mixed use development. And there are trail easements that are ready to be recorded for both a original trail site and a alternate trail site for if it gets disrupted due to construction or other factors. And I know that this project has been in the works for a long time, so I think everyone is familiar with it, but so I don't really have a whole lot else to say.
No, that's great.
Okay.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great summary. Our first action on this is a public hearing. So rather than diving straight into questions and comments, I'm going to ask for someone to make a motion to open a public hearing. And I saw Mitch move and Emily second. All those in favor of opening public hearing, please raise your hand. And Elizabeth, oh, great. There's a thumbs up sign. That's great. Thank you, Elizabeth. So public hearing is now open. Way to find that sign. I didn't know that existed. Lisa.
I don't know how to take it off now.
Well, you're just agreeing to everything from here on out.
All right. Oh, no, it just went away by itself.
It does. It times out.
Okay, cool.
Lisa, do we have any public comment for this public hearing?
We have one comment. Yeah. So this is from David Galligan, PhD. It says, I am writing about the proposed subdivision of the Emerson property for the so-called Chainworks development. I would like these comments to be read into the record. I am a homeowner on Spencer Road in the city of Ithaca, near to the proposed development. The site of the proposed Chainworks development is very important for the health of the city in its present wild state. Ithaca is blessed with a lot of steep terrain, so that we necessarily have significant undeveloped land near the urban center. Thus, Ithaca is gorgeous. The OU2 parcel is the key part of Ithaca's green surround, providing connection between Buttermilk Falls, the protected 6 Mile Creek watershed, and the green space on the Ithaca College campus. Some of this green space is protected by special status like the park, but much of it is only protected by virtue of its topographic difficulty of development. The proposed Chainworks development has special dangers. Development on such terrain will seriously harm the land. Development of this key site would be a very bad precedent for various other sites with similar topographic difficulty of development. I urge the board to do anything possible to halt this development. Thank you very sincerely, David Galligan.
And is there any other public comment?
No.
Great. Is there a motion to close the public hearing? So Mackenzie move, Emily second. All those in favor of closing public hearing? All in favor. So public hearing's now closed. Do we have any questions or comments before we move to the resolution? We can still have discussion if we do move to the resolution. See, oh, Lisa.
Well, I just wondered if, just for the public's information, if anybody should be watching, if there should be a response to the comment.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can say what I think, and then maybe I could open it up. We've been looking at this project for a long time. This site is not just precious because of its natural areas. It's precious. It's important because it is a contaminated site that requires a great deal of cleanup to reach the levels appropriate for the development considered. And that cleanup and that development are both good for the city. We've taken a hard look at the impacts created by that development and what that would mean for the city and what's required to make sure that goes the way it should. It's been an extensive process that's gone on multiple years. And I believe this board believes that moving forward with this development is appropriate and best for all concerned. And is there any member of the board wishing to expand on that, take issue with that, or otherwise respond to the public comment? Lisa.
I just want to say that the vast majority of the topographically challenged part of the site is not going to be developed at all. That is part of the plan to not develop the parts of the site that have very steep slopes. And in fact, there is a trail that will be running through that part of the development that connects many of the features that the writer mentioned.
Okay. With that, and we will definitely have a little bit of discussion on this resolution, but is there a motion for the resolution at issue? It's the pink resolution for preliminary and final subdivision approval. I saw both Mackenzie and Mitch move, so one moves and 1 seconds. And then before we get too far in discussion, I know, Lisa, that there was one change requested by council.
Yes. Ari Levine, our city attorney, asked that we reword the 5th whereas to add to read as such. The terms of such easement are laid out in 3 trail easement agreements and associated exhibits, 2 of which are to be executed and filed with the subdivision plats, and a 3rd jointly to the town and city of Ithaca as required in one of the first 2 easements will be executed within 60 days of the recording of the subdivision plats.
Great. So we're changing the 2 to 3 and explaining the difference between them.
Yeah.
And this is about those 2 trails that you mentioned previously
That's
in
right.
the response to public comment. Great. So that seems comprehensible enough. Are there any questions or comments from the board about this resolution or this project that we should address before we move towards a vote? I'm seeing heads shake. Okay. With that, I think I'm comfortable moving towards a vote. Lisa, do you have anything? All right, great. With that, I'm going to ask all in favor of the preliminary and final subdivision approval that's before us. Elizabeth? All opposed? Oh, I said all opposed first, so I maybe screwed it up. Could you turn off your microphone, Elizabeth, and tell us how you vote? Sorry about that.
I vote for it.
Thank you very much. So that is unanimous for. Your subdivision is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the next project, City Harbor.
By the way, Lisa, thank you for this.
Oh, you're welcome. Does that explain it? Good.
Really, really helpful.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. Anya, were you able
So-
to text CJ? I don't have,
Let me
Maybe
see
one
if
of-
I have her.
I don't have her.
I'm gonna double
I
check.
know
I
you
think I
sent-
put it in, but I
Yes,
don't know if
no.
she's.
Yeah. I know everybody exchanged contact information. I'm not sure I got
Oh,
her cell phone.
I don't think everybody did. That's.
Okay.
Yep. I don't have it. Hold on a moment. In the meantime, do we want to admit
Yeah, I think
Frank?
that's fine.
There
Oh,
she is.
She's
Yeah,
back.
I
Good.
got
She
her.
was. She must have been watching. Good.
All right.
Yay.
I'll admit the other two people. All right.
I texted her.
Perfect.
If anybody has not given me their cell phone number at this point, maybe text me at some point with your name and I'll make sure I add you to my contacts. So.
All righty. I see Frank and Costa. Is there anybody else joining the team?
David Herrick should be here.
David,
I'm
it's
here.
Frank. It says you're Frank, but
Not anymore.
Oh,
yeah, there you go.
sorry.
Was David Cruzy going to join, David?
Yes, Anya, possibly 518331. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
There's no one in the waiting room right now.
There's no one in the waiting room just
Going
yet.
in the waiting room. Okay, all right.
We're going in alone. That's fine.
All righty. Well, I appreciate you guys, joining us this evening. We are considering final approval on this project tonight, and that is, it's been quite a journey to get here. So that's exciting. We have a big resolution with a lot of parts in it. But before we get into that, maybe you guys want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what we're doing.
Sure, thank you. David Herrick with TG Miller, and I've been working with the City Harbor team and owner group to pull together the plans and documents and follow-up that was required from our preliminary site plan approval back in May. And there, as you can imagine, there's an awful lot of detail that's embedded in the conditions. And Costa and I are here tonight to first thank you for entertaining modifications to the original May approval conditions. And we specifically want to bring up some concerns that we have that relate to what is proposed condition Roman numeral 3 under the prior to issuance of building permit amended condition. And we'll speak to that when it's appropriate to do so. We appreciate all the other consideration that's been given, and we feel that we've made significant progress to the point where while we're shovel ready, we know that there are some issues that are not going to be as timely as we had hoped in order to get this project off the ground. But we're making an effort, and we hope that what we can share with you tonight relative to some of the tricky conditions can be considered and passed.
Thank you very much. So do you have a presentation for us tonight? Do you have new things to show us?
We don't have anything new to show. The submission of large volume of drawings was in essence in response to what I call the easy conditions of the preliminary site plan approval. There is one item that I know has raised a couple comments recently relative to planning for future secondary emergency access to the Newman district from any of the adjacent municipal owned properties or existing streets. So I am prepared to talk about that a little bit, put it into context relative to when secondary emergency access is believed to be required. So that we're prepared to speak to that, if helpful.
Okay. Let me talk to Lisa for just a second here. It sounds like most of what the applicant has for us today is material related to conditions in the resolution that we're about to pass. So would it be most appropriate for us to move that resolution and look at that in the context of discussing those conditions, or do we get into that first? Just procedurally, what's proper?
Well, I mean, you could really do it either way. If you haven't planned on a presentation, I mean, many of the things that we're drawing related are pretty detail oriented, and I could see why if the board does the board want to look at those and ask questions, it's totally appropriate to move the resolution and then look at the drawings if you want to, or just move the resolution and then go through their memo or if anybody has any problems. I think it can be done either way.
I would feel comfortable moving straight into the resolution. Is there anybody on the board who wouldn't feel comfortable with that? I mean, I think maybe that's the question I want to ask. Seeing none. All right. Is there a motion for the yellow resolution that's in front of us, the final approval resolution for City Harbor? I saw Emily move and Mackenzie second. I also saw Elizabeth's thumbs up, but I'm not sure when that came in. So that is moved. It is open, and we have a couple of concerns raised by the applicant about particular conditions within that. And to speak to those arguments, there are drawings in support of that. And maybe we should just dive into that, just straight away. The first one that I have marked is the Roman numeral number 3 below before issuance of a building permit that reads, approval by Common Council of New York State Department of Transportation's proposed West End couplet concept. So, yeah, Lisa.
I just wondered if it would be helpful to the board if I could explain what that is.
Sure.
Since you haven't really seen it, maybe you have recently received an email about it, but you haven't really seen it or been involved with that discussion yet. Have you? I don't think you have you? Yeah. So would it be helpful if I explained what that is? Okay. So you got in your packet bunch of information about it, and probably you received today an email looking for comments for it. So what happened is in the continued conversations with DOT on January 30th, they submitted these additional comments. And the comments, and they added on page 3 of their comments about the project, and they really look at both of this project and the Carpenter Circle project together. They added 3 required mitigations, one of which was this reorganization of traffic flow in the West End, and that's described in some drawings you got that are also attached. So they presented this to us in the city and said that, these are required mitigations. So that means that they are going to require this to happen in one form or the other before they will permit any work on Route 13 related to these projects. So for City Harbor, that means any intersection or pedestrian improvements that would happen in Route 13. So that was a lot. And so the developers are really not in charge of whether or not these improvements can happen, because it has to go through a whole public and political process, which we as staff have started. We presented this concept to the planning board, and we just started doing public outreach. with the goal of determining whether the city is interested in pursuing this in one way or another. There'll have to be a fair amount of engineering and, well, not engineering really, but it has to be studied to determine if this is really the right solution, if this works for the whole waterfront and not just, these two projects. And so, that takes some time. So we have started that. We've started public outreach with the goal of gathering comments and questions and concerns that will be turned into a scope of work of how to study this. And DOT has said that if Common Council can approve this idea in concept while it's being studied, then they would feel comfortable with then, starting to work on the approvals for the Route 13 improvements related to this project. Does that make sense?
It does, insofar as a Byzantine state level bureaucratic regulatory framework can.
Yeah. So we're trying to get to the conceptual approval with council. We're trying to get to that level, but we're not in charge if that will happen.
Okay. So what Lisa said sounds very rational and reasonable. I'd like to ask the applicant what the issue is with the condition as written.
Well, in terms of process, we worked through our environmental review and our understanding of necessary mitigations within the corridor, for quite a long period of time to get to a point where we had, understood what needed to be done at the Willow and Day Street intersection, taking into consideration the vehicular capacity issue, as well as the pedestrian and bicycle crossing safety improvements. So we feel that we have addressed those mitigations that were understood and stated at the time that we completed the environmental review. It is unfortunate that the timing of the West End couplet puts into play a very potential long review process locally, and a concern that, well, what if it never happened? What if there was no acceptance of the West End couplet at the city level? Where would that put our project? So it's our intent and our expectation that the conditions that were originally stated during preliminary site plan review approval are still applicable, and that there is protection, if you will, to ensure for the city that the mitigations at Willow and Day will be completed by the development. There was also material that I believe you have seen that came from Joanne Cornish relative to requiring the applicants to provide a letter of commitment. And it's our position that the original condition, which is identified as Roman numeral 2 in the reordered conditions under building permit, coupled with the letter of commitment that we will agree to provide, satisfies our mitigation of the impacts that we analyzed and that we understood and that we agreed back in May to provide. So the concern being that there could be quite an extended process for the West End couplet to find its way through the community, through City Hall, before any of our two owner groups could put a shovel in the ground. And while we understand the relationship, we feel that it's going to be a significant time delay in our ability to do anything in the waterfront. And it may not just be our project, but the extension of a similar condition could have impacts for small and large potential developments. We know the DOT site's now up on the auction block. It could be an issue for that site if this type of mitigation that DOT is is requiring the city to buy into is maintained. So
So to make sure I understand what you're saying, the impacts that you raise, I mean, that I find that very believable. The schedule impacts I buy. But your position is basically, to unfairly summarize, is that we're covered without this condition, that even if we're not waiting for Common Council approval of the West End couplet, that you are on the hook for any mitigations anyway. My understanding is that those mitigations are conditional on DOT approval, which is then conditional on council approval of the West End couplet. So I'm not sure that I follow your logic, and it may be that I'm just not understanding.
So if I could just add here.
Sure.
I think the way I understand it, and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is, and the way that I believe it is that we have agreed, we have found funding for all the improvements at the Willow Day intersection that the planning board had reviewed and signed off on, and that in fact the DOT had reviewed and said, yeah, this looks good. It was only in the 11th hour that they tied us to the couplet. Anyhow, what I am proposing, and this isn't a formal proposition, but this is how I understand it, and I would hope it would be amenable, is that we've got the funding. We have the plan to do it. You can hold our feet to the fire as much as you want to feel comfortable. But what we just sits so uneasy with us is the timing and the potential for a negative vote from Common Council on the couplet, which then throws the whole project, including Guthrie Medical, into a total tailspin. So to kind of answer your question more succinctly, we can promise, for lack of a better term, that we'll fund the work, we'll do the work at the Willow and Day as previously proposed. What the tricky thing is the timing. So let's say the couplet is somehow squeezes through in 3 months, we're happy. We'll be mid-construction, hopefully with Guthrie, we'll get it done by the end. But say it doesn't make it through, or it's extended process, 8, 12, 2 years, or it never does, we have to somehow have an agreement that we will still do the work to Willow and Day the second that the state issues a permit, but we're at the mercy of the state at that point. And we can do as much as we want, the city can do as much as they want to try and make it happen, but we're at the mercy of the state. And it's quite frankly, it's unfair for us, it's unfair for the city, it's unfair for the people who live in the city, but that's the position we're in, and there's no other way to put it. It's very awkward.
I appreciate you laying that out, Costa, I apologize. I agree that it's unfair. I think that one of the concerns on the city's part is what happens if we were to go with your hypothetical proposal. You were to get your buildings built. We don't get the mitigations built in that time. What lever does the city have to ensure that you follow through? And the answer is that it doesn't necessarily have one, because your building's built.
Right.
And I think that's tricky. Lisa, are there subtleties to this that I'm missing, or are we ready just to go around the room and talk about it?
I don't think there's that much subtlety. I mean, it's a pretty big hammer that DOT issued. They said this is required mitigation, so they're not going to permit that's my understanding. They aren't going to permit the improvements to Route 13 proposed by this project and as mitigations in the Part 3, unless, the city gives a conceptual approval of exploring this option. That could change in the future. They might move on it. I don't know, we don't know what's going to happen. We just want to get to conceptual approval. That's all they are. So basically so there's really, so it's a very difficult spot for the developer, because they're not going to be able to build those improvements until DOT is satisfied that the city will look at this. It's really, yeah. I don't think there's much subtlety to it. Does that make sense?
I think so. I've been watching people's facial expressions, and I'm excited to hear what people say. So maybe we should go around the room. Garrick, would you mind leading us off?
Yeah, sure. Is my microphone volume okay now?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, my position on this is the same as it's been in the past, which is I really think it's unfair to hold one project responsible for system-wide improvement that needs to be made on Route 13. People build projects in Lansing, and the people who live in those projects drive into Ithaca and drive out of Ithaca on Route 13, and no one says a thing of it. But then when we build housing that's close into the downtown core that allow people to bike or walk to work, we say, hold on, we need to put the whole thing on hold until we figure out the traffic. So I just think that's really unfair that the central project that's the most in line with our comprehensive plan in terms of transportation gets singled out to be responsible for improving an area-wide transportation problem. So I think these things should be separated. The applicant has agreed to make the improvements requested at the intersection that's right by their site. I think that's more than sufficient. And as far as I'm concerned, they should start building. Now, I don't know the legal issues of this and who's responsible for what, and what the attorneys say, I don't know. But just from my perspective, I think these are separate issues. This is a great project and they should start immediately.
Thanks, Garrett. Emily.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's unfortunate that they're holding this project hostage, these two projects hostage. But I feel uncomfortable removing condition Roman numeral 3 completely. I agree with Garrick that they need to start building as soon as possible and not have to wait. So I wonder if we can make it a condition that's moved to before issuance of certificate of occupancy. I mean, that puts a large risk on the developer because they're building and this condition is still in, but I feel really uncomfortable removing the condition altogether for fear that the city would be left without any mitigation if we can't sort of move the hand on the DOT at all.
That's an interesting idea. Thank you, Emily. CJ.
Yes, thank you. So, well, I keep thinking back to, all right, so there's the 4 character areas, right? The Newman District, Market District, West End Waterfront, Cherry Street District. I think it seems a heavy hammer. I agree with Lisa for this particular project to kind of bear the burden of a transportation analysis for that entire area. And I just wonder if it makes sense to reopen the environmental, for the seeker for the zoning and do a transportation specific TGEIS, kind of like was done at Cornell. I'm not saying that's a responsibility of this board or this is should directly impact this project, but say that we impose this condition right now, a month from now, we're going to be looking at the same thing for another project. It seems like there's, we got to find a way to put the toothpaste back in the tube here, because, sorry, I live on 79. It seems like it could be a really good opportunity to get a handle on kind of an area-wide transportation impact, and then that way these next projects can, hopefully, like Garrick is saying, fulfill the aspirations of this urban waterfront that we're looking to do from this perspective. And I don't know if that's helpful for this particular project, but that's my thoughts on it.
Thank you, CJ. Mitch.
I agree with what Emily and Garrick and CJ are talking about. I don't really have any other comments. I do think it's kind of a classic case of the tail wagging the dog here, and it's unfortunate that the development team is having to deal with this. So if there's anything we can do as a board to move the project forward, I say let's do it. And I just did want to ask about David's explanation about Joanne's letter. She asked for a letter of commitment, and you're saying that I guess the MOU condition is the one that covers it. And I just want to make sure that that is okay with the director of planning. I didn't know if there was any follow-up to that issue.
So Joanne has asked for a letter of commitment. It's a condition on before the issuance of building permit. We've got verbal confirmation from the developer that they will provide that letter of commitment. And so I think if they do that, that can stay as a condition. They've agreed to it. So, right? Is that correct, Costa and Dave?
Right. Yeah, our expectation would be that we would provide the financial assurances to the city that the value of the mitigations would be covered through bonding as a fail-safe, if you will. I fully expect that the timing of mitigations being implemented would be 2023 plus or minus. And, but again, we would provide those assurances to the city that the money will be there to support the mitigation when there's a collective understanding of what the DOT is ultimately going to allow the city to do within the corridor.
And if I may just add very quickly to Emily's point earlier, I think that bonding, you know, to us paying for the improvements before they can happen, you know, is a pretty good, you know, that holds our feet to the fire pretty good, because otherwise, you know, this is $500,000 sitting in an account that we can't access, that's doing no good for our project or for the city for that matter. So I would ask that you think about that potentially, you know, because we're willing to do that. You know, if we could, I shouldn't say this, and this is off the cuff, but if we could just pay, you know, some certain amount of money to get or collectively plan to get the couplet done, this wouldn't be such a huge issue. It's really this timing that is way beyond, you know, risky for us. It's you know, it's a public comment, common council vote. It didn't go over that well in PEDC, I might add. So it's scary. And you know, if where we need your help is yes, hold our feet to the fire. Tell us what would make you feel comfortable that we will get these mitigations done at Willow Day and Route 13 when we're allowed to do them, whenever that may be. If that's before the project's over, that's better for both of us. Our access is better. If it's shortly thereafter, fine, we can deal with that. You know, if we have to battle the state for a while, we will. But help us figure out how to move these things along, especially Guthrie. The residential can wait a little bit, but help us figure out how to do this. I guess I'm pleading.
Mackenzie.
Thanks. Sorry that for a few minutes my internet was pretty choppy and then it cut out, so I lost some of the preamble to this round, but I'm pretty sure I know where we are. And I agree with you know, the notion that this applicant is going above and beyond what's required right now, and that you know, I think Garrick explained well where the burden could lie and where it is lying right now with this project. And I guess I have a question around what we can do to help push it forward. I don't know if, you know, if we're waiting for Common Council to approve something of DOT's, but it didn't go over well at PDEC, like what role does the board have to play in moving this forward? And I'm also curious if any of this is related at all to you know, a letter that we got from Cynthia Brock about the emergency access. Like, are those two completely separate issues, or do we need to deal with those at a similar time? I know it seemed like maybe both of them could be, or at least the emergency access could be punted a little bit towards phase 2, but I don't have total clarity on like the timing and the needs for that emergency access portion and whether or not it relates to the couplet.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Lisa, do you have anything that you could say on that?
I don't think they're not related. I feel like that was resolved with the email from Tom Parsons, in the sense of it, you know, and we can go into that after we talk about this. I think they can be separated. Okay. However, if I may, I think that, you know, the board could play a role in as CJ sort of said, I don't think we can put the toothpaste back in the tube, but this is a situation that every development is going to have, and we have to get a handle on it. We can't go back in time and say, okay, you know, we should have done, I mean, we can say that, but we need to do some kind of transportation study for the waterfront area and figure out what's going to work for the long term. And certainly the planning board could be very good positive force in recommending that to Common Council. If it starts with the couplet idea, or if it expands on that, that would be very helpful and positive, I think.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Yeah, so I think I'm in agreement with what everything everyone has said. This is a positive project for the town, for the city, and I'd like to see it go forward. And I empathize with you having to make a commitment on items that are beyond your control. So I think that if we could reward, I'm not saying this right, but if we could reword it somehow and have some, like CJ said, some sort of parallel study where we're moving forward with the DOT concerns for traffic, they obviously need to be addressed as well. So I appreciate the bond that you're willing to commit to on your mitigations for transportation, but it needs to be part of our larger plan, right? So what if the mitigations change and you have, who's gonna take that that responsibility for those changes, you know? If you end up having to make more of a commitment than you bonded. So I'm not sure what the answer is here, but I think we've discussed several different ideas that together could be a solution.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I agree. I'm going to try to summarize what I think we all heard, and then I'm going to open it up to hands. CJ, I see your hand. I'm going to grab you in a second, if that's all right. I feel like what we heard was nobody saying leave the condition in as it's written. I heard a few voices say strike it. I heard one voice say move it into a different category where instead of it being a condition for building permit, it's a condition for a certificate of occupancy. So it gives us some more time to figure it out. And then I've heard, at least one voice saying blow it up into some bigger analysis that's not just about this project and let this project move forward. And then I've heard a voice saying, let's rephrase it to give us some assurance beyond what we're going to get from the bond. And so there's a lot of stuff there that I am not quite sure which parts are realistic and which ones aren't in terms of actually moving forward tonight. And with that, I'm gonna look for hands in a minute, but first I'm gonna call on CJ.
Thank you, Rob. So the one thing I was thinking is and I don't know where planning stands on this. It's very odd, I would say, to receive a proposal for a major transportation realignment of the entire downtown the day of a meeting and have that as a condition of approval for a project. I would say that's incredibly unusual, and I'm not even frankly sure what to make of it. That said, I'm wondering if planning would be open to, if you did reopen just the seeker and just the transportation section for the rezoning, that could be a conformance with the conditions that are determined as mitigations at the time of whatever the TGIS is, or whatever the reopening of that particular, whatever those conditions are that are found to mitigate the project. I wonder if that is a good tie to this project, because then it's not, heaping this project with the couplet specifically, because what if that ends up not even being the mitigation of the result of that analysis, right? I mean, if DOT has thought about this all summer and this is their conclusion, okay, this solves all the problems for the waterfront, okay, I'm hip to that, and I'll be quiet about the opening any kind of seeker for the previous waterfront, for the entirety of the waterfront rezoning. But if we could at least maybe in advance of those other projects see what the conditions were that they've come up with those two, maybe a bit more in advance, that would also be helpful. I will cease and desist now.
Thank you, CJ. I need help unpacking that. And so I'm going to look at Lisa.
So, yeah, I mean, what CJ is suggesting is to go back to the zoning, and she's saying there should have been, reopen the transportation section for the waterfront plan and zoning, and amend the seeker for that. And yeah, I mean, that's probably what I think we can do it another way without going back. I think we can move forward and do a transportation study for the waterfront. I think that's has to get done. And this concept of the couplet, or whatever it ends up being, to improve safety and vehicular travel through the corridor, as well as other kinds of travel to the corridor has to be studied. But right now, we don't have a project and money for that. So, you know, so, I think DOT recommended what they thought would work. You know, this is something they wanted to do for a while, and because they have approvals that they have to give these projects, they can say, yeah, this is part of it. You have to do this too. And so I think that it would be helpful for the planning board to recommend to Common Council, whether it's this couplet or just to take a more comprehensive look and to put resources into taking a comprehensive look at transportation in the waterfront area in order to realize a vision of the waterfront plan. I think you could say it like that. That would be some kind of transportation study. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Rather than reopening seeker. I mean, you could do that, but I don't think you need to do that. I think you can.
And I didn't mean to insinuate that. Just that was kind of an option, but just thinking, the transportation alternatives, the TAP money is about to open up. That could definitely go for planning for, specifically this type of condition, I suppose you could say. I'm not meaning to be critical of anyone, just trying to think about
no,
ways
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, so are we.
Mackenzie, I saw your hand. Well, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thanks, no problem. This is all really helpful. It feels kind of like a new discussion. It's not something that I feel like the board deals with all the time. Does this have to be like an either or thing, or can it be kind of a both and situation where we request a traffic impact study, that like Common Council and DOT are part of, and also we strike that approval from this because the timing just isn't appropriate, I suppose. If it's not, I want to be careful about setting precedent, because sometimes a policy is enacted in the middle of a project that we really hope like plays out in that project, like affordability, for example. But in this case, I feel like, there's some kind of new ideas, new implementation, and it's like at the very end of this project. And it does, I think that the board all agrees that we don't want to hold this particular applicant like to task for a much bigger thing. I feel like, yes, we should definitely do a traffic impact study, and also maybe like approval of that shouldn't be required for this particular project because it doesn't exist yet. And that's just kind of the way the timing worked.
Thanks, Mackenzie. I think that's a reasonable suggestion. So as pointed out, we do have a couple issues before us at this point. We have, what do we do about the West End traffic mitigation? And I think there's some consensus emerging that we need to do some sort of study, but that's not necessarily tied directly to the approvals of this project. And then in the approval for this project, there's this condition which the applicant objects to, and not without reason. This is a weird situation in terms of timing and in terms of, state level meddling. And so what do? We could just strike it. I will say personally, I really liked the common, sort of the middle ground that Emily proposed, moving it to a later stage of the approvals. Then we come back to it and maybe we strike it then, or maybe we get it satisfied. And then, I think Elizabeth hypothesized a rewording that got us more comfortable. Where do we stand? What do people actually want to do? I mean, is there a consensus to strike at this point? Is that what's emerged, or are we interested in looking at some of those other ways of dealing with this? And maybe I should just go over. Oh, Emily.
Thanks. I suggested moving that number 3 to the C of O, but the more I think about it, I don't know that solves the problem, because we would still be holding the applicant responsible for something that is a DOT issue. So if I'm still happy to move it just to buy time, if it's possible to then reopen this and maybe strike it down the line. But I don't know if that's too much red tape. If I'm okay with just striking it now, is what I think I'm evolving towards.
Okay, I appreciate you, clarifying that. I had really been sold by it. I really liked that idea. I thought it was an attractive punt. Mackenzie, I saw your hand.
I think we could also, I think that we have the right to say these mitigations the way we want to, right? And like approval by common council, approval of a different entity, of a different entity's plan, like it's all very external. And it doesn't seem like an appropriate mitigation for this board to hold anyway. So instead we could say like, this board hopes that the applicant considers DOT's plans, but not hold them to common council approving it. That feels like it's actually a little bit more in our wheelhouse to like make that request of them. But yeah, so I'd say striking it or like really softening the language. That's where I am with it.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we should go around the room and see where people are, whether they want to strike or whether they want to do something else. And you could just tell me what the something else is. Oh, Lisa.
I just want to make sure that you understand that if you, I mean, and I agree that it's very heavy-handed and everything, but if the reason it's in there is because without some kind of assurance that they can build the pedestrian improvements on 13, they might not get built. The project might build out and those improvements will never get built. So there will never be improved pedestrian crosswalk on Route 13. Just want to make sure you understand. That's why it's in there. So it's just want to make sure you understand that. Not that the developer's willing to build it, they're going to finance it, but DOT might not approve it. So I feel like it is totally out of the planning board's wheelhouse to be having to have such a condition on, but it was in an effort to not let this project happen without those having more assurance that those things will be built. And I mean, I'm not, obviously you should make this decision. And I just want to make sure you understand that.
That helps a lot, Lisa, because that makes me feel even more strongly that we don't need it in here because it's part of the plan. We're approving it. We're approving those pedestrian improvements as part of the plan. And if DOT says it can't happen, then that's like a separate issue where DOT says it can't happen. But assuming it's approved, it's guaranteed. Those improvements are guaranteed to be part of it because that's part of the plan that we're approving, right?
I mean, yes, it happens all the time that, in different ways you approve things that other people have jurisdiction over. So you want to make sure that whoever has jurisdiction over those improvements is somewhat on board with them. Mm-hmm. So, that it happens a lot actually in your work because.
So it sounds like more of a consideration than a condition to me. Like we understand the possibility that some of this plan may not be able to move forward because of other decision-making bodies, but we're approving the plan with these improvements in place and assuming all other approvals move forward, that's the plan that's approved. And then it's like, we don't have any control over it, we can make recommendations to common council, but we don't have control over their approval or not anyway, whether or not it's a condition.
So if they couldn't build it in the future, what do you think should happen? Should they come back to you for a revised, what, if they couldn't build those improvements in the future?
Well, then things stay the way that they are until there's some broader city waterfront traffic plan.
Emily.
So it sounds like the question is coming down to, do we want this project at all if we can't get the pedestrian revisions? And I think, at least from my perspective, we want the project, even if those pedestrian revisions can't happen. We all want them, but I would not cancel the project altogether if they can't happen.
I'll say that I agree. I still keep going back to the middle ground that you've walked away from, which is to put it on the C of O, because then they have to come back. And if they don't, I get why that is unfair in the same way that the condition in the current spot's unfair.
But if we did that, we would be in a really tight position because the thing would be built.
Now we make them do something else.
Yeah.
No, we'd have the leverage over the C of O, and if we can't make them do A, we could make them do B because we have, something. And I feel like if we strike, we no longer have a thing. We have this money that's bonded, which is nice, but we don't have the same leverage to say what they do with it. Although maybe I'm just wrong. So, I mean, if somebody wants to explain why I'm wrong, I'd be happy to listen.
Can
The
I
CO,
add?
the CO is a really bad time to negotiate anything
it
big.
really is.
I just want to say,
Can
like, go on.
Can I
Emily.
add that such an open checkbook kind of at the end of a project it's not looked favorably upon by financiers,
By anyone?
Every major bank, if we just said we'll figure it out at the end, and right now we're looking at $500,000, who knows what it could be then, they would be a little scared.
No, I relate to that.
And I'm just saying that just to clarify, where we would be slightly opposed to that kind of condition.
I'm sure that's true. No, I'm sensitive to that. I just like it better than where it is. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like that's where the board is headed. So let's go around the board and let's ask people if they want to strike this or whether they want to do something else, whether it's move it, reword it, whatever. I think consensus is to strike, but I want to get everybody on the record. Garrick?
Strike.
Thank you. Emily? Oh, sorry.
Rob, before you go on,
Yeah.
where am I missing? Where is the bond language? What item is this?
We're offering that now.
You're offering this, so that's not in here now.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
That would be in the letter of commitment, right?
Yeah, I just want to make
that
sure
would be in the
I'm not
letter.
overlooking it. So, Rob, I mean, look, I think that from the point of view of the applicant, offering up to improve the pedestrian access at that intersection and warranting that with a bond that covers us if they, for example, if they went bankrupt or whatever, is really all that we can ask of them. They would do it now if they could, but they can't. They're willing to offer up money to do it in the future when they have the permission to do it, and they're willing to back up that money with a bond. I think that's enough. I don't think we need any other condition. Let the Department of Transportation figure out how they want to do the sidewalks. And when they do it, they'll have the money to pay for it. The only other thing I'd add is, and since I don't have the bond language in front of me, I don't know, but I think it's, the amount of money that should be put in for the sidewalk should have some limit to it. So it shouldn't be an open-ended obligation. So the applicant agrees to pay for sidewalk improvements up to, what some reasonable estimate of what it would cost to build what is currently proposed, so that they're not put in a position where 3 years from now that the DOT decides it needs to be some mega project and then they're liable for paying for it. So I think their liability needs to be limited. But I just rigorously object to holding any permit hostage to the actions of the Common Council or Department of Transportation. It's just not fair to the applicant to invest millions of dollars in a project and then their right to use it when they're done is subject to some other body who could take 10 years to figure it out. So I say strike it.
Fair enough. That's well put. Emily?
Strike.
CJ?
Strike.
Mackenzie?
Strike it.
Mitch?
Strike it, although Lisa's explanation, I've been thinking about that and I typically defer to her expertise on that, but maybe it's a rewording. I'd like to hear what Lisa thinks about this since she's the one sort of, behind the scenes doing this stuff. But right now, strike it. So.
I'm gonna get Elizabeth, then I'm gonna come back to Lisa if that's all right. Elizabeth?
I agree. I think it's a rewording. Maybe it doesn't belong in the permit section. But I like what Garrick said about the applicant will commit to making an investment of $500,000 for pedestrian access. I think that can be done. What do you think, Lisa?
Well, I mean, the pedestrian access that we're talking about was detailed to great detail in the part 3 and explained. That's what you approved. You approved the drawings for the pedestrian access. It's crosswalks over Route 13 with a median refuge, and then other they have to do some things. So I think that they've estimated the cost of that to $500,000, and that I don't have any reason to doubt that that's what they would cost. It's a very well-defined scope of work already, I would say. So does that answer your question, Elizabeth?
Yes, but the
Okay.
issue is if the DOT does not approve that particular plan, that they would still be on the hook to make improvements to pedestrian access with the plan that DOT does approve.
So I think
some other plan.
Yeah.
Just for the record, DOT has approved what we sent them. The issue that outstanding is the issuance of a work permit.
Yes, they won't, right. They don't have an objection to, DOT's position is they think these projects are too big. They're going to put too many cars in them. So how do they increase vehicular capacity within the corridor? That is not the city's position. The city has a different position, that creating places where people work and live and recreate, and if we increase pedestrian amenities, that is going to mitigate the traffic, right? That's what you as a board wrote in the part 3, and that's so it's a different perspective. But DOT still has to permit that. So I don't like it. I don't like this. I don't like the condition. I don't think it's fair to, well, I don't know about fair, but I don't think it is burdensome, but I don't know how to get there anywhere. And I can't think of how else to get there. So I would say if you're gonna remove it, which is certainly your purview, if you could couple that with a strong recommendation to Common Council to invest resources in exploring the couplet and whatever other transportation improvements are needed in the waterfront area to facilitate the vision for the waterfront, that would be helpful rather than just, I think that would be helpful. Yeah, I think I've said that. Does that answer your question, Rob? You said you want to, yeah.
I think so. I think that people are generally satisfied with what you just said, just from reading faces. And I also think I heard a majority for striking. There were some complications around a couple of the voices, but definite majority for striking. And I think when there was enough voices in support of the bonding thing, and thanks for catching that it wasn't in the resolution as written, Garrick. And so much of the bonding question is wrapped up in this letter of commitment, which we don't have yet, that I wonder if it's not worth pinning something down, sticking in some sort of bonding condition in the resolution, and relying on that when we strike the current number 3. And I wondered, Lisa, what your thoughts on that were.
I think that what is supposed to be in the letter of commitment is in the last whereas. So if they choose to bond it, then that takes care of it. That certainly takes care of it. They're otherwise solely responsible for the financing of it. So bonding it is a great idea. You could, it seems like that it's already detailed that they have to take financial responsibility. Saying they're going to bond it satisfies that. I don't, if you want to specifically say bonding.
I think that would give me a level of comfort. I don't know that that's where the whole board is, but so at least a couple other nods. And the applicant's willing to do it. And so maybe we just, Elizabeth, I see a thumbs up. Are you asking to speak? Sorry.
No, I'm saying that I agree. I think that's
great.
the way to go, is to add some verbiage about that bonding and what it's going to be used for.
So under the condition 4, you could say submission of letter of commitment as requested by the Director of Planning and Building, including a commitment to bond for the improvements or something like that.
Yeah, I think that kind of language super appropriate. Mackenzie, I saw your hand.
Yeah, also, I just want to point out that in that whereas around the letter of commitment, it states that, the applicant understands and acknowledges that any changes to the approved site plan would have to be approved by us or staff is allowed before they can be implemented. So if it were to be down the line after they, start building, that Common Council for some reason doesn't approve this, that change to the plan is already going to come back to the Planning and Development Board. So I think that there's kind of that fail safe for us to get to work with the applicant again on like how we might change things. I mean, it seems like if Common Council doesn't approve it, everybody's hands are tied. The board and the applicant's hands are tied, and we can't really force those improvements, but we could potentially talk about other mitigations or something. It seems like it's, you know, there's room for this to be open, for the discussion to be open in the future if Common Council doesn't approve it, but we're not slowing everything down and cutting all opportunity off for the entire project based on Common Council's approval. So I'm comfortable with that being there.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I think that's a fair read. So that was a lot. I feel like we just put one condition to bed, and there's a whole other rest of the resolution here. David, I'm going to ask you, you mentioned 2 conditions specifically that were applicant concerns. Can you point me to the other one? Because I don't have a little star by it.
Okay. Well, I think if maybe I misspoke, condition 3 was the one that we had an issue with, and perhaps what I was alluding to was that as part of what's embedded in condition 2 under issuance of a building permit deals with the transportation improvements and emergency access improvements. And I went to great lengths in our cover letter to Lisa to explain how I saw those as being 2 discrete and different objectives, one from a planning perspective and one from an approval perspective. And we have just dealt with the transportation side of condition 2, but the emergency access was understood by our group to provide just a concept level understanding of what might be access opportunities to the Newman district other than just the intersection at Willow and Day. And so we did develop a concept plan, which was in your packet, and the goal was to find a way that in the future, and clearly if phase 2 comes back to the city, this secondary access issue will be a must. It will have to be addressed. Or if there's any other development potential in the balance of the Newman district that wants to come back to the city and offer additional residential housing development, that too could trigger the need to understand the second means of access for emergency vehicles. It's not to suggest that it would be a secondary means of access for the public, but it would be emergency access for life safety purposes. So I developed a concept plan that looked at neighboring opportunities, and that's namely to the lands on the south side of Cascadilla Creek. And it involves land that I understand is owned by the Ithaca Area Wastewater Treatment Facility, of which the city is a member municipality, and that there would need to be, over the course of future planning, outreach to the owners of that facility to understand if there is an opportunity to try to co-locate some emergency access for those emergency vehicles, and perhaps develop another bridge that could be a co-location of the waterfront trail and emergency access. So these are just concepts, just early thinking put on paper that was our understanding of what had to be done in order to address condition 2 relative to emergency access planning. And
your position is condition 2 is satisfied with what you've got.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for spelling that out. Lisa, is that a fair read? Is that where we are? Should we strike that, or do we leave it in, or how do we feel?
So I think that I think that we can take that part of it out. I mean, what we, David didn't come up with this idea on his own. We talked to Tom Parsons about it and we looked at various other routes, and ultimately he felt like the one to investigate further would be to co-locate the emergency access, which would only be used if Willow Ave were blocked by a train and there was a fire in that area. I mean, that was the only time it would be used. So he felt that that was, co-locating that with the trail was the best option because it already exists, and it's really just purely for, an unforeseeable, really for very narrow situation. So he seemed to feel satisfied with, at this point, that's as much as we need. So I would say that I agree.
So that seems fairly settled. I don't necessarily think we need to go around the room, but I am going to ask that if anybody takes issue with what's just been discussed about emergency access, now would be the time to raise your hand or just unmute yourself and say your piece. All right, seeing none. I'm going to open up the floor to the board. Is there any issues we want to make sure we address before we move towards a vote on the resolution before us, which is a final approval on the City Harbor project? All right, I am going to go around the room. Garrick, any final thoughts or feelings, questions, or issues?
No, I'm very good with what we've come up with. I just would like to, I do think it makes sense to spell out the bonding and just put that in as an additional thing. And do we have any language on that? Or did I misunderstand that we're not agreeing to that?
We can put under condition 4, submission and approval of a letter of commitment as requested by the Director of Planning and Building, including commitment to bonding the full amount or something.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Nice. Thanks, Garrick. Emily.
I'm good with both of those changes. And I wonder about our language or suggestion to common council. Is that something we want to put in here? Is that something we want to talk about at the end tonight or soon?
I think we have an agreement in principle on what we want to say, but we should maybe move towards detail at the end. I don't necessarily want to discuss it with the resolution since it's its own document. Thanks, Emily. CJ.
Yes, did you say you did want to discuss language about the surety or?
No, I thought we'd pick that up at the end since it'll be its own communication.
Okay, great. Yep, I'm good.
Awesome. Thanks, CJ. Mackenzie.
I'm happy with changes we've made and excited to approve this project and see it move forward. I think it's going to be such a great asset for the city.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Mitch.
Good with changes.
Thank you, Mitch. Elizabeth.
I agree to the condition for the commitment letter, including wording about the bond, but I think we need to be specific about the bond amount and what it's going to be used for.
Okay.
Otherwise, I am ready to approve the resolution.
Lisa, let's circle back to that language. So we want to say that bonding the full construction costs related to traffic mitigations on Route 13
That were detailed in the part 3.
As detailed in the part 3. And I don't know that we want to set a number because
they've set a number.
They've set a number, so we'll use that number. Okay.
We can get you the quote, the estimate too. It was done by a third party.
Okay, that would be helpful. Emily?
I mean, do we want to say, what if this happens in 5 years? Construction costs could be significantly more than the amount bonded.
That's a fair consideration.
Construction costs based on these drawings at the time of the pedestrian improvements. Something like
it's
that.
Based on a scope of work, the actual cost can change.
Okay.
The scope of work is what it should be based on.
Okay, so let's reference the scope of work. Let's reference as defined in the part 3 and reference full construction costs. And, we'll do our best. Emily.
Sorry, I have one tiny little change. It's just a typo. Under additional conditions at the end, I think that's 16, the first one. It says night green and it should be ninth green, that's all.
Oh, nice catch.
just since it's our final document.
All right. Any other questions or comments before we move to a vote?
So I just want to make sure I understand everything. We're taking out condition 3 completely and then submission it, and we're adding to the submission of a letter of commitment, a bond for the scope of work for the construction costs as detailed in part 3. And then the 9th green. Thank you, Emily. That's all, right?
I think that's it. Mackenzie?
Can I-
As detailed in part 3 and referenced in an estimate from the third party mentioned by the applicant. That quote might as well be part of the record.
That seems reasonable. CJ?
And would you want to make the estimate of costs to be prepared by a PE and sealed accordingly, and have the annual cost reflect prevailing, because this would be a public works project, right? So would you want to put
It would
anything
be
in there?
the applicant would be doing the work.
Okay, so it would not be.
I mean, it
subject
might
to
be
prevailing
contracted
wage.
out. It could be potentially contracted out to somebody else, but you know, like if the city were doing work or they were doing work, but they've agreed to do the work.
Okay, I would just, I think somebody mentioned an inflationary rise for the surety, and yeah, I would make sure that's in there.
So I need more specific language yet.
Yep. So, I mean, CJ is referencing, I think there's a couple things in there. One is having some provision for construction cost inflation, and then the other is prevailing wages if this were to become a city project. The response I heard to the prevailing wage thing was that it's not a city project, it would be an applicant project, and so that may not be appropriate. And then the construction cost increase, I think is tricky. I'm not quite sure how to create language around that. Because
I think you need to bond a specific amount. You can't bond
exactly
to a scope. Am I wrong?
No. I mean, when they put money into an account which they can no longer access, and they write the bond on it, it will be a specific amount. I don't know that we as a board have that specific amount today, and I don't think we should pick a number. So we have to figure out how to describe that number. I'm sorry?
Nor do you have really jurisdiction over the bonding. I mean,
Sure.
It doesn't matter if the bond, they are in good faith, it seems to me,
Yes.
offering to bond $500,000. Will it cost $500,000? I don't know. They have to build it, whatever it costs, but they're offering to bond $500,000. I mean, for the project, they have to build what they said they would build. Right now it costs $500,000. If they want to bond that, great. We don't have any way to really regulate that or keep track of that. If it costs more, they have to put in more money. It's the scope of work that's important, not the bonding. So I feel uncomfortable getting technical about the bonding, because really what they have to do is build the project, and in good faith, they are offering to bond. What do you think?
The bond is a bonus, it seems.
Does that address your concern, Elizabeth? I hear what you're saying.
Well, I'm confused because there's a bond for the project, but I think what Costa's offering is a separate bond for this pedestrian work.
Correct.
So it's a separate bond.
It is a
But I
separate
think-
bond, but we don't have a number for that.
And we generally don't make requirements around how much money applicants save or set aside for any portion of a project. I think what's important is that we're holding them to build the project as planned and approved. And they're putting $500,000 in a bond because they want to set that aside for these pedestrian improvements. Whether or not they have to pay more or less at the time of doing it isn't really for us to determine now.
I agree, which is why I'm confused about the language about, costs going up or whatever. I don't think we need to put that in there.
I would agree with that.
I don't think so either.
CJ, I saw your hand.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, also you could give them more flexibility by just, referring to a bond or a letter of credit or whatever form, Joanne is.
Buy a bond or a
essentially
letter of
comfortable
credit
with.
or,
Yeah, some kind of financial surety that satisfies director of planning. Cool.
Yeah, and I think
I feel
Misha-
better about that than trying to be too specific about
totally.
what we have to put in the bond and how, because just
Cool.
because we don't know. They've offered to do this out of good faith and could cost more, could cost less. That's
So I think we've reached consensus on this. I think we've gotten to a good place. I do want to open it up for anybody with concerns, questions, because we've been through a lot. So if you have anything, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. Seeing none, I'm ready to move to a vote. All those in favor of the yellow resolution before us, final approval on this project.
We move it?
We already moved. We
You're
moved to
doing
the
it?
second.
Okay, I forgot. All right.
All those in favor? And I think that was everybody. Yeah, so you have unanimous approval.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Really
very
appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Very excited about the project. It can make a big difference to the waterfront, to the city. It's
We hope so.
compelling design. It's compelling use. It's really exciting.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great night.
You
care.
too.
Thank you, you too.
All right, that brings us to Asteri.
Hello, everyone.
All righty. Is the gang all here?
We are all here.
Excellent. Take it away.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. We have a project update. Okay, sorry. Work in progress. We have a project update that we have some facade material updates for based on our last few conversations with the board. We've decreased the amount of stucco on all of the elevations. The materials on the facades have changed from a fiber cement panel to a metal Versalock panel. So in the drawings, those are the light gray panels on the facade that go up to the 7th floor. I'll zoom in a bit here. So you can see that material is the light gray that is all on all 4 facades on metal instead. So we feel that's a positive change. And we've lowered the height of the screen on the roof to shield the mechanicals there. A few of our other updates based on a few things we've been talking about are perspective rendering of the north alley that shows potential locations of murals and the articulation of the facade materials just to follow on those conversations we've been having. We also included a more detailed lighting drawing so that you can tell what lights are being used underneath these reveals and to eliminate the murals themselves. And we included a copy of renderings of the project as seen from Aurora and Green Street. Those were shown during previous project meetings. So those were the materials that are in your packet. There are ongoing updates to the FEAF, and we hope to talk about those at some point soon. A few other separate processes are going on. So we've shown the lot line adjustment drawing, the way that the property lines are changing. So instead of a lot line adjustment, the project will be doing a subdivision. So the IORA has been coordinating on that with TG Miller, who is working on that independently from the project. So that gets a public hearing and council action. We are on the agenda for the BZA in October for the height and rear yard variances that we've talked about. And we're working with city planning staff to coordinate a meeting with stakeholders about the city hall loading and parking area between Asteri and City Hall, and the east-west alley that's between Asteri and Herald Square. So those are some updates. And then as we look ahead, we're already near the end of August now. So looking toward PRC, we'll be giving a full design update, all of our building plans, elevations, perspectives, landscape plans, site plans, civil plans, and that will include the garage as part of that. So we're looking forward to progressing some of those more design related conversations as we're hoping to reach the end of the seeker review process. So at the end of September during the regularly scheduled planning board meeting, we're hoping for a seeker action on the project. And if it is being planned in your planning to have another meeting on the 29th, which we understand is a possibility, if you would consider having this project on the agenda for the final design approvals and site plan approvals, we would be available and ready for those conversations because we are making some live schedule adjustments, as we speak. For example, we're not talking about the FEAF tonight. So that was getting right into some details quickly. So we're here to discuss as helpful.
All right, thank you very much. So given that there's no action on this today and it's just a project update and we've had the presentation, it might be worth just going around the room, seeing what reactions and questions are to what we've seen so far, and then seeing if there's anything to leave the applicant with on that front. Emily, could I start with you?
Sure. So Kate, I received some material percentages in my packet for today's meeting. So are you saying that, for example, north elevation synthetic stucco used to be 52% and now that has changed, right? And fibrous board cement everywhere will now be metal panel.
That's right. And all of the percentages of stucco on all of them have decreased. So this is the same as what you have in your packet. So these don't reflect the changes of percentages. What I recall on the north facade was a change of about 9% decrease from the stucco. That was the most significant change.
Great. Okay.
In terms of the decrease. But yeah, we also felt that the change to metal instead of the fiber cement was a pretty significant positive change.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that change. That's great. So that's my only comment. And I just, for the board, want to bring up Cynthia Brock's letter because I am now confused. I thought we kind of put the conference center to bed, and now that her letter brings it up to question for me whether the city is actually ready for a conference center because their decision was kind of pre-COVID. So.
Thank you, Emily. CJ.
Yeah, I'm just curious, the changing from a lot line adjustment to the subdivision, the creation, I don't think I saw anything in here about the creation of the new lot. So I was just curious if those would be treated kind of together as a single action with the subdivision and site plan.
We'll update the seeker for that to include actual subdivision, and they will submit that so that you'll have that as before you make your seeker determination.
Oh, okay. And why the creation of a new lot? I might just be missing it. So.
Because it's one lot now, and so you know, if you do the lot line adjustment, you're creating actually creates a buildable lot, which is the not that it would be built on, but it creates a lot that is in conformance with lots for the downtown zoning. And so right now that lot is the parking lot. We don't have any intention to build on it, but it is a buildable lot. So it does create a buildable lot. So it's not, can't really be considered a lot line adjustment because it creates a lot that meets the standards for a buildable lot. Does that
Okay,
make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And
Maybe
then
if we-
I'm also, yeah, and I'm sure they'll show it. No worries, you don't need it right this second. You know, I was definitely surprised to see a letter from Cynthia because, you know, I also, like Emily, figured, okay, well, I guess, you know, we need this conference center. Everyone is on board. And then, so it seems to call into question, you know, whether this is going to be a significant city expense. You know, the $2 million price tag is definitely eye-popping in a time where aid to municipalities is being cut. You know, the state's not going to have any money either. Just kind of curious what everyone's thoughts are on that.
Thanks, CJ. Mackenzie.
Thank you. I appreciate the material changes. Those updates are nice. And, you know, in general, I think the project just continues to evolve in a really great way. I also want to reference Cynthia's letter and more specifically than just kind of like wondering where the city might stand. I mean, I feel like we heard a presentation from the city well into COVID times, still advocating for the conference center. So I think that we could say that we know what the city's stand is. But my question is, let's assume that travel or businesses or whatever, you know, in-person meetings are on hold for some extended period of time, another 6 months, another year, another 2 years, something. What programmatically, is there some kind of contingency plan for the conference center space? I think the case for the conference center was made pretty well, but it seems like now the case to be made is, what do we do with that space if it can't be used to its full potential as a conference center for some extended period of time? And, you know, hopefully shedding some light on how that would impact, you know, like this tourism improvement district property tax.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Mitch?
I don't have many thoughts. I feel like this is the project we've been looking at. This is the project I think they're going to move forward with, which includes a conference center. So I don't really understand how that decision could be sort of unraveled at this point. Maybe there's something that I'm not understanding. You know, based on Tom Knipe's presentation about the city's position on a conference center and why it's viable. So you know, COVID or post-COVID, seems to them at least that it's still workable. The only design thoughts I had, which I guess we'll hear more about in September, are the this idea of adding wood and accents and color to what I think is a rather bland facade of the building. I think the project's great still, and you know, I'm so happy to see affordable housing coming downtown, and I think we've dealt with the proximity issues. And so I'll just look forward to further conversations about various elevations and facade articulation in September.
Thank you, Mitch. Garrick?
Yeah, I just repeat what Mitch said. I'm full agreement.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, not much comment to add. I'm glad that you're making modifications to the facade, and I look forward to having more in-depth conversations about those.
Thank you, Elizabeth. For my piece, you know, the conference center decision isn't ours. You know, I've never been a conference center booster, but council made a decision, and if council wants to make a different decision, then they can pass something else. You know, legislators that are on council can make their voices, you know, heard to us, and they certainly do. But they don't speak on behalf of full council when they raise concerns. And the way that council speaks is they pass stuff. And the thing that passed is a conference center. And to me, that's just where we are. So we have to review the project that's before us. The project that's before us includes a conference center, which we feel however we feel about, and affordable housing, which we all feel pretty strongly positively about. And so that's where we are. I'm excited to get into the design stuff. The design changes that we've seen with materiality, I think, are positive. I like to see the expanded metal. And there's more to dig into. I'll say that for my piece, that ground level activation on all sides of the building is going to be super important, and I'm excited to dive into that when we get to it. Because there's no action tonight, I want to make sure that the applicant's getting whatever feedback they're looking for so that they can move towards whatever they're trying to turn for us next time they're before us. So I'm going to ask the applicant if there's any issue or item that they want us to speak to before we call it for tonight.
Well, we just want to make sure that we are able to plan for whether you are having that special meeting on the 29th. If we're having a seeker action and a potential site plan conversation, that will be a robust conversation during the month of September. But we feel like really ready to get into more of a design conversation and to show updates based on all of the conversations that we've had to date. But we just want to confirm with all of you that that should be something that we're prepared to do later in September.
I think we're planning to decide on the extra meeting in September, end of meeting tonight. I think that we're going to get into that at the end and decide if we're going to do that and what we're going to do with that meeting if we do. And I'm going to ask Lisa if we'd be ready for a seeker action at a normal meeting in September and then additional work to follow.
I think you certainly could consider it. We've certainly gotten into real detail level of the project. Would be considering preliminary or final site plan approval before the zoning variance, but I do feel also that you can rationalize that if I think you're in a position. You certainly haven't skimped on looking at the design of the building, and looking at the impacts. So if you felt like that was something you wanted to do, that would certainly help the schedule for the project.
So I think tentatively we'll plan to take a hard look at that action at our next normal meeting. And then we will figure out if we're having a special meeting to follow and what's on the agenda for that. And we should get that decided probably at the end of meeting today.
Rob, it's Bruce here. Good evening, everyone. The only comment I've got that we really didn't dig into too much is that I think Kate mentioned that we're working with planning staff to work through the final outcome of the layouts and functions and uses for the space between the Asteri project and City Hall, which also includes the space between Asteri project and Harold's Holdings and the south side of those buildings against the Commons. And I would like to understand that that might take some time to work through, and for the board to realize that that is, when we talk about a subdivision or a lot line adjustment, either way, that space we're talking about is not technically in our project proper, but we're willing to work through and figure out what needs to happen. I want to make sure that we understand that the design of that space may still take some time to work through in a public facilitative process. And we probably will be working on that for some time to finalize that space. And I want to make sure that doesn't hold us up in the long term.
So thanks for raising that. I think that was clear, but I'm gonna check with Lisa that doesn't necessarily cause problems with us with the actions discussed.
I don't think that should cause any problem. They can always come back in the future to, it's not going to be a space that it's going to be used in a very particular way for at least 2 years. And so that gives us at least 18 months to figure out what we want to do with it. And that can come back to the board when it's ready.
Yep.
All right, well, that might do it unless there's any other questions or comments by anybody here, staff, board, applicants. All right, well, that does do it. Thank you very much for the time. Good luck, and we'll see you next month.
All right.
Thanks everyone.
And that brings us to the 215 East State Street project, for which I do need to recuse myself. I do have a conflict of interest. And Mackenzie, our vice chair, will be taking over. Thank you very much, Mackenzie, and I will see you guys in a little while.
See you in a little while.
Bye.
Bye. Welcome, James.
Hello.
Are we expecting the rest of your team tonight?
Yeah, they should all be hanging out on Zoom. So you should have like Jeff Rimland, John Abesh, Jared Hutter, Brian Rosen, I believe all are hanging out. The only one missing tonight is Brian Bouchard because he's at another meeting.
Okay. Looks like everyone's all the J's are making their way in at least.
Yeah, Team J. Brian, you're out tonight, you know.
The J's and Brian.
Yeah.
The Bryans and the J's.
Yeah.
Sounds like a band.
Is Jeff Rimland on? Because I don't see him.
I don't see him in the waiting room yet.
He was here before, but he left. Yeah. Usually joins by phone, right, Anya?
I think so. See, I wasn't sure. I think there he is. I think everybody's here now.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Are we waiting for Brian also? But no one else is in the waiting room.
No, we can move on.
All right.
No, Brian's unavailable tonight.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, then let's get going. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's start with a brief presentation of any project updates you have, particularly points that were brought up at Project Review Committee. We're going to go through the part 3, which we have done in part, and we're going to just make sure that everything is complete as expected. We'll vote on environmental significance, and then we'll have a brief discussion about the variances that you're seeking and making a recommendation to the BZA. So I'll
Okay.
hand it over to you for an update.
Hey, John, the majority of the updates were stuff on the architectural stuff. So you want to show and just briefly go through? Because there hasn't been any real wholesale changes. It's just minor tweaks.
Sure. So the main thing we changed based on the PRC meeting last time was on level 1, landscaping along the front of East Green Street. We talked about the landscaping around the transformer, and we were showing trees before. Unfortunately, due to the utilities in that area, there's not enough room in order to get larger trees in there. So what we did do was provide a new planting scheme that CHA did send over. But from a rendering standpoint, this is what we plan on doing: is some bushes and some flowers along the street here, guarding and hiding the transformer location. What we've done at the transformer as well, as we talked about hiding the transformer, we're using that language along the balcony rails to create a tighter mesh around it to hide it as well, not just with bushes. So we're doing both to start to kind of add some greenery to that corner. And other than that, that was pretty much the only change from the PRC meeting to now.
Do we have those drawings, John?
James, do you have the updated landscape drawing from CH that you sent?
Yeah, I believe Brian submitted all those things under correspondence. At least it shows.
This rendering was updated last night, so I don't.
The
I don't
rendering,
have this
no.
updated right now.
So we'll want to get copies, at least for staff to have, of those
Yes.
renderings.
And I can drop those off, Lisa. I have to be down there on Thursday.
Well, I don't think they're necessary for seeker really, but we definitely want to have them for, I mean, the screening around the transformer
Yeah.
could easily not be considered a seeker issue.
All right. Right. Okay.
But for the general project record.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's no
But-
problem.
And then that was the only change that we really discussed at the PRC meeting. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that brief update. Let's go quickly around and we'll just hear from the board about that change, the transformer. I know that was a hot topic. And then we've also got some we have some public comment that I'd like to reference after we hear about that. So I'll start with CJ.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate trying to have that treatment around the transformer. Those flowers are gonna totally get crushed. The plantings, hopefully they'll survive the salt. It might be better to have something a bit more for less alive, perhaps in that area. But I appreciate the effort.
Okay.
Thanks, CJ. Mitch?
I'm good with the changes.
Great, thank you. Garrick?
Nothing to add.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Looks good. I like the lighting. Was that new?
We did update the lighting for the PRC meeting. Yes.
Oh yeah, I miss those usually. Looks good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Emily?
Looks great. Nothing to add.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Just a reminder that something else we'll want to see before preliminary or final approval will be your signage package. I know we've talked about that before, but there's just that. And I also just want to point out, I assume that you've received this, but just in case you haven't, the board received word from one of the tenants at Sunny Days with some questions around how they will be impacted, if there'll be work on the patio of the commons. They're interested in passageways and garbage and recycling during construction, mostly pragmatic questions. Have you received those yet?
We got the comments emailed today from Lisa, so yes, we have received them.
Okay, great. And so I would just encourage you to continue open communication with tenants of the building and helping to answer those questions. We don't have all of those answers, I think, but yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, so if there's nothing else outstanding, we can move into the part 3. And I also want to point out to the board that we received from Bay Saver Technologies a stormwater treatment plan so that we can incorporate into our part 3. I don't see, Lisa, any highlights of things that are new. So would you recommend that we, continue to go through this piece by piece, or is there anything that you want us to focus on right away? We've spent a good bit of time on transportation.
You have. So there's 2 things, I think. Well, one is just that you never submitted the energy questions, a response to the energy questions that I got, at least. That's an outstanding item.
We can fill that out. James, I sent that back to you and Brian.
Yeah, I thought Brian forwarded that on, so Lisa, I'll just confirm here.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, not sure. So as you're looking at that, and then I would like just you to put your eye on page 17 in the street level active use zone. The way we were talking about it, I added the changes from last time. I just want to make sure that accurately reflects your discussion.
I see. Great. Okay, so let's move to page 17. The second large paragraph is about that overlay zone. John, do you maybe want to pull up the renderings you have of the green space first floor while we're discussing this, please? And thank you.
Absolutely.
See that painting again.
The painting.
So the Reader's Digest of that paragraph is that the planning board has it under their purview to grant, special use of that active use overlay zone, and that in this particular case, the applicant is proposing art because it's an entrance way to a lobby with some public amenities, and I think the flanking of that lobby is probably the specific areas that we're thinking of. Are there any members of the board that have concerns or questions or thoughts about this particular portion of the street level use? It doesn't look to me like anybody's having any concerns. So Lisa, I think that you probably have gotten the language correct. That we foresee no significant negative impact to the community plans as anticipated. Okay, great. And so Lisa, how do we feel about moving forward with voting on the part 3 without the page 15 portion of impact on energy?
Well, if they have it, they could certainly pull it up.
We're working on that right now, so.
Yeah. I mean, it could be moved to site plan approval, but it really usually lives in this section, and to have I don't think we've really talked about it. It would be
Hey, John,
helpful
can
to
you
have
pull
it
it
in
up?
writing. Yeah.
What
Oh,
you
the
sent?
Tompkins Energy one?
Yeah.
Okay,
Or
got it.
your response to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, if you want to walk us through your energy plan right now, that would be great. And to know that these questions are in writing, Lisa can
Yes.
incorporate that text, and we could move forward with this.
Got it.
On it.
And I'm happy to email it myself as well. So as far as the first item that was related to water fixtures, all the water fixtures on the project will be selected to be water sense rated. That is always usually the plan. All appliances selected for each unit will also be Energy Star rated in order to minimize any energy consumption in the building. Item 2 on that was about HVAC systems, especially for public space and for residential units. It'll all be electric air source heat pumps to avoid any fossil fuels. That is currently in the plans right now, and as we move forward towards permitting, that's being refined and will be in the plans. Although the electrical design currently is not based on a solar panel system, we do plan on saving energy by following the specific points within the Ithaca Green building policy and saving 25% lower power density than code at a minimum. The roof layout as well is very simple, so we do want to provide an efficient layout to allow the possibility for future installation of photovoltaic panels. That's always a strategy we try to take. Item 4 about building shape. This is a simple building shape. It minimizes exterior walls as much as possible to the exposed elements. Helps keep a more insulated internal environment. The window to wall ratio is targeted to be less than 30% on each facade in order to, lower energy used in heating and cooling. The exterior insulation is continuous rigid insulation, so it minimizes the thermal bridging in the metal studs behind the wall. So that's very, very efficient. All light fixtures will be LED fixtures in the building. And the layout will reflect the most energy efficient way to light each space appropriately, especially in the corridors. We like to minimize lighting in there as much as possible and avoiding overlighting any areas. Occupancy sensors will be provided where possible in order to ensure a controlled lighting approach as well. Item 6, the HVAC systems used will be based on the required SEER rating to comply with the latest energy code, and each unit will allow for thermal zoning for each space. So if you're in one bedroom, you're going to have your own zoned area. All ductwork layouts will be run the most efficient layout, minimized and insulated within the conditioned spaces. So no ductwork will be in an unconditioned space to minimize any energy loss. And the engineer will model the system with a ComCheck review along with prescriptive compliance measures in an effort to maintain an efficient use of energy throughout the project. So those are just the standard measures we take every time. And that's what we plan to do.
Okay, great. Thank you for spelling that out for us, and also for your reference of the Ithaca Green Building Code.
Yes.
It's great to see that policy being enacted. Are there any questions from the board around energy impacts? Looks like there are no concerns there. So,
and Lisa, you should have this now in your email again. I just forwarded Brian's email from last Wednesday to you.
Okay, I would just incorporate that directly into the part 3, just as written.
Yeah.
Is that
I think that seems appropriate. And so then with that, we can move on to the seeker neg deck resolution. Do I have anyone willing to move that?
Hold on one second. Can you guys stop sharing your screen so that I can see all of the participants? Thank you.
I saw that Emily moved and Elizabeth seconded. Do I need to vote on opening it? Let's vote. We'll take a vote. All in favor of opening seeker?
Oh, you're just moving the resolution. You're
We're
just
just
moving the
unmoving
resolution.
it, yeah.
You did it, which you did. Yeah.
You moved it.
I
Great.
just vote. Yeah.
Okay. So is there any discussion, knowing that we will add language that we just heard around energy into the part 3, which of course is referenced. I'll just go around. I'll do a little round and make sure that we're all comfortable moving forward on this negative declaration. Mitch.
Comfortable with it.
Great. Thank you. Garrick.
Comfortable.
Great. CJ.
Yep.
Thank you. Emily.
Comfortable.
Great. And Elizabeth.
Looks good to me.
Great. I'm in agreement. So it looks like we don't have any questions around this. Yeah, this is, we appreciate this kind of infill, additional adding to existing building stock. It really helps to reduce the impact, reduce negative impacts and increase positive impacts for the community. So all in favor of passing this negative declaration? Let's see a show of hands. Waiting on Elizabeth's thumbs up. Perfect. That passes unanimously. So you're all set with that. And my guess is that our next, you'll probably be bringing further design changes. We'll continue with site plan review in September. Let's take a moment to discuss your zoning variances. Are you on the schedule with the BZA?
Yes, we've submitted everything, and the BZA was really being on the board meeting was contingent on getting seeker complete so they could act on the variances that we're requesting, which are a height, number of floors, and rear yard.
Right.
So
you have that in front of you. Yeah.
Yep. So now that you have seeker complete, you're able to move forward with BZA.
Correct.
Happy to move you along. So board, let's just take a moment to discuss how we want to recommend to the BZA. We are looking at 3 variances. One is number of stories, 14 as opposed to 12 as allowed. We're looking at height as the second variance, 156 and 10 inches as opposed to 140 feet. And we're looking at a rear yard setback. Rear yard 0 feet as opposed to the required 10 feet setback. So are there any, I mean, we've been discussing these as a matter of site plan review, but are there any concerns about making a recommendation to the BZA? Doesn't look like there are any concerns. So we could discuss language, and I would propose something along the lines of, this project is increasing the housing stock and improving upon existing infrastructure. And we've determined that we don't see any negative environmental impacts or any long-term negative planning impacts. Is there anything that anyone would like to add to that language to the BZA? Are people comfortable with something sort of simple like that?
The importance of creating Green Street as a corridor, of investment and walkability.
Yes, thank you for that, Mitch. And also I would add to that, having a connection through a building from the Commons to Green Street. It's also an important improvement. Anything else that anyone would want to add to that? Or do we feel, yeah, Lisa.
Well, I mean, I think it might be, obviously the BZA knows this, but just for the record, it might be important to acknowledge that a lot of the height variance comes from the elevator tower. The stories come from the fact that there's a roof terrace, right? For the most part. And so it's not really a whole story that is being asked for. That might be helpful.
Yes, I think adding language to suggest that would be great. And also that the elimination of the rear yard is to help create a consistent street line on Green Street. So adding to the context of nearby buildings is another positive planning impact.
I thought the rear yard was the common side.
It is.
The address is State Street.
Yeah.
Which would make the rear yard
Green Street. Is that what?
Correct. You have two, literally you have two front yards depending on the address of the buildings, 215 East State Street. Fire department will probably request that we have an address on Green Street as well, based on some emails that John and I have been receiving. So it's either the deviation of 15 feet, so we can have right away to right away based on what is consistent with the developments in that area.
All right. Yeah, I think for the purposes of this, at least, we're looking at Green Street as the rear yard. Anything else to add? Does the board feel comfortable moving forward with that recommendation? I see no objection, so I think that's it. We'll send that along to the BZA and you can get on their schedule. And we'll see you for a further site plan review, probably in September. And perhaps you can update us then also on communications that you've had with tenants to make sure that they're aware of trash and recycling during construction, if there's going to be construction on the patio in front of buildings, so on and so forth. I'll just be curious to know that, although it's not anything that we are going to hold you to with any legality. Anything on your end? Anything you need from the board? Any questions that you've got?
I just have a question on, based on the Vecino presentation prior about potentially another special meeting or a meeting you're adding, and I know it's being discussed later, but I believe we're on the September 1st BZA meeting. So if there is other meetings that are in between meeting dates, we'd love to continue forward with you as we develop stuff. So, because our goal is, upon approvals, John and his team is ready to submit for building permits, and we'd like to start construction of this project, sooner than later. So, if there are additional meetings, we would be more than willing to come in and continue the conversations with your board.
Okay, thanks. We will certainly consider that when we discuss that 5th Tuesday coming up.
Okay,
wonderful.
Great. Well, thanks for your time tonight. Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate all your time.
Yeah, thank you. See you next time.
Thanks.
And we can invite Rob back, please.
Rob has returned, and Christian Brunel from Burn Terrace is now in the room too.
Hello. Thank you, Mackenzie, for running the show there.
My pleasure. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'll also note that I think you made up some lost time, whereas I had left us behind schedule, so I appreciate that. If the applicant would, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what we're looking at today.
Well, everyone can hear me?
I think so.
Okay, well, it's Christian Brunel in front of you once again, Vice President with Burn Dairy. Been in front of you guys before for the remodel of the Denny's into a Burn Dairy fuel facility. I'm just going to go over the 3 changes from the last meeting. I believe these were the last 3 to-dos that I had on my list. One was a fence between our property, the residential property, to the rear, to the south, on the site plan that was submitted to Lisa, and it is in a document center. I saw it. You will notice that there's a 6-foot custom wooden privacy cedar fence with a detail. in it. Again, it's 6 foot tall along the whole rear of the property in between that and residential. The other one guys wanted me to look into was signage. Megan Wilson did review the signage per Lisa's request after last meeting. On August 20th, she sent an email to Lisa saying, I meet all the signage requirements, which is in the document center. The whole package, I did a separate package and it's on the site plan. So that meets all the city regulations. The third thing and the final thing was with the city forester. Jean Grace had made some comments last meeting in regards to pear trees. I had some red maples and pears mixed. She did not like the pears. We have changed them to hawthorn trees. So she also had some additional comments on the red maples. She would have liked to see them moved off the curbing more for salt and plowing, which we did incorporate that into the site plan as well. So I addressed, she gave a nice detailed email. I addressed every one of the concerns on those and sent them back to her. She is fine with all changes. So I believe I've addressed all 3 of the to-dos and gotten correspondence back saying that. And I think Lisa can attest to all that. So that's where I stand. I think I'm in pretty good shape at this point.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So we do have 2 actions before us tonight. One is the potential neg deck on seeker. And then the other one is the potential preliminary and final approval. And I think unless that there's issue that members of the board want to bring up beforehand, we can just move into the first one and start looking at the part 2 for the neg deck. Lisa, I saw your hand.
Oh, yeah, I just had a question on the location of the fence.
Mhm.
It's on C201 and it cuts off all that green space. And I just wondered if it would be better to put it along the property line so that green space is kind of incorporated into the parking lot. I don't know why you made that choice.
Okay, that choice is if you look at the elevation change there, it drops off about 7 feet and it turns into a swamp.
Okay, all right, yep.
Yeah,
All right.
a literal swamp. Again,
Yep.
if you see the elevation lines, you can see it now.
Okay,
And I believe it says edge of wet area. That's why we did it,
all right.
to follow the contour of the property.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the applicant before we start looking at the material on environmental? Seeing none, I'm going to direct everyone's attention to the environmental packet, which is mostly the part 2, it looks like, with some additional items stapled onto the back. And because there is no part 3 for this project, I thought we could just review the part 2, see if we're comfortable, and then potentially move into that resolution. So I'm looking at the first page of the part 2, impact on land. I'm seeing a no, and that to me seems appropriate. Similarly, I see no's on items 2 and 3, geological features and surface water, which also to me seems appropriate. Similar on 4, groundwater, and 5, flooding, no impacts. There is a yes on air. And we have listed here no or small impacts on B through F. And that to me seems accurate. No impacts on plants and animals, that's 7. Nor on agricultural resources, 8. And that to me seems accurate. Similarly, no impact on aesthetic resources or historic or archaeological resources. And that again to me seems accurate. No impact on open space, 11, or critical environmental areas, 12. Again, that seems accurate to me. Similarly, no impacts on transportation, energy, or noise, odor, light. Oh, sorry, there are impacts on noise, odor, light. So that's worth diving into. I see checks for light shining into adjacent properties, low impact, and temporary construction impacts, low impact, which to me seems probably correct. Human health, 16, every box is checked. Might be worth going through that in a little bit more detail. All these are checked as small impacts, and that to me looks correct and appropriate. Similarly, we have all small impacts checked for 17, community plans.
Incorrect that this requires an area variance. It did originally, but I didn't take that out.
Okay.
So I would actually check that no now because it doesn't require an area variance.
So you would check all of 17 no, or just 17H?
I would check, the reason it was checked yes, in my opinion, and you may have a different opinion, was because it needed an area variance, but
Sure.
it doesn't actually need an area variance.
Got it. So that makes sense to me. And then 18, consistency with community character, no impact is checked, and that to me seems accurate. So the part 2, as far as I can read it, is pretty clean. It makes sense to me why there's no part 3. But I do want to check in and make sure everyone's comfortable and that there's not additional questions or comments that we want to get into before we move into a neg deck. And the floor is open. You could raise your hands or just unmute yourself. And I'm seeing heads shake. Oh, no, hand. Good. Mackenzie?
Yeah. I'm happy to move forward with a negative declaration and with preliminary approval. I do just have a question about where it might fit, that this is a great reuse of an existing space. As the city moves towards wanting to reduce vehicular traffic, I wonder if we want to make any statement about, adding fuel tanks. It's not something that I have that I think needs to delay. I don't think that we need to delay anything, and I'm not trying to block anything. And I, like I said, I think this is a great use of the project, but I don't know. Does adding fuel tanks, is that in opposition to a certain plan, or is it not? I mean, we don't really address specifically the use of fossil fuels maybe in the comprehensive plan and whatnot, but we do generally aim to move towards different modes of transportation. So I don't know if we just want to say that somewhere. I'm not proposing that we move to a part 3 or anything like that. I just think it could be worth stating for the record.
So perhaps in a whereas in the neg deck, or more in the site plan approval?
Yeah, maybe as a whereas in the neg deck. We could add a last one, because we say that the City of Ithaca Parks, Recreation and Natural Resources Commission, they've all had a chance to speak up. No one's in opposition. And that while the city hopes to move towards alternative energy use away from fossil fuels, we are in support of adding a gas station to this high traffic area and reusing an existing building, something like that.
So that sounds to me like pretty benign language that, I certainly don't have a problem with. Lisa, this is a little bit different. Is there any reason that we wouldn't want to stick that in the whereas?
I think it's fine to stick that in the whereas. I would just move the resolution and then make a motion to amend it, like you said, if that's what you want to do, and see what people.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
So let's do that. Is there a motion for the pink resolution, the neg deck on this project? I saw Elizabeth move and Emily second. And I'm going to be smart and not call for a vote, even though that's my instinct. And Mackenzie has proposed an amendment in which we would add a whereas and reference that even though the city supports and envisions a future where we are less reliant on fossil fuels and less encouraging of fossil fuels, that this is an appropriate use, an appropriate spot, and a good reuse of an existing building. That is briefly.
And a local business.
And a local business. That's a good one too.
Yeah.
How do people feel about that language? Is anyone opposed to that language? All right, Elizabeth, I saw your thumbs up after I asked if you were opposed. So I got to ask.
No, I'm approving.
There is a thumbs down, Robert. So
Well, I'm gonna have to find that part of the software. I apologize. So yeah, it seems like everybody supports that. Let's add that whereas. Is there any other discussion to be had on the neg deck before us before we move into a vote?
Is there something, is there some tie to the comp for that maybe? I was just trying to look up Plan Ithaca and see if there was something that's inside of the comprehensive plan, but.
I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, for not having gas stations or for having, reusing a existing site.
The latter is in there for sure, but I don't know about the former.
Yeah, I mean, I think the direction the city's going in is more like energy use in buildings rather than, and providing electrical vehicle stations, not saying, you know, gas. So most cars run on fossil fuels, so.
Yeah, I don't think that the city has made any official statement that we're like trying to get rid of gasoline diesel cars or anything like that.
I was like, I feel like I remember that somewhere, but
yeah.
I wouldn't reference the comp plan. I think it's just sort of an understood like direction eventually. Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we move on towards a vote on the neg deck? Seeing none, all those in favor of a negative declaration for 323-325 Elmira Road, please raise your hand. All right, that's everyone. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. We have a neg deck. So the other action before us is preliminary and final approval. The schedule has this as potential, which means we don't have to do it. Not that we have to do anything. So if we decide we're not ready for this, we could totally punt. But I will say for my piece, this project seems pretty well baked. You know, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't move towards this. Since this has been sort of a brief discussion on this today, and this would be our last opportunity to discuss this project prior to approval, I think it's worth going around the room, just checking in on how everybody's feeling. CJ, if you wouldn't mind, I'd start with you.
Yeah, it's good to go. Great reuse of a site. Thanks.
Thank you. Mackenzie.
Happy to see it move forward.
Garrick.
Yeah, agreed. Appropriate project for the location, good reuse. It's a very attractive project. I appreciate the applicant putting effort into making it look good. Thank you.
Emily.
It's a great project. I'm glad to see a local business reusing a site, and it seems like a good spot for this project.
Mitch.
Ready to move forward with it. I also agree with Mackenzie's comments earlier in principle, so thanks for those.
Elizabeth.
I agree. I mirror everybody's assessment of the project, and I'm ready to move forward.
Excellent. So there's definitely consensus. I feel similarly. So with that, let's see, we haven't moved this yet, have we? So I'm going to ask for a motion for preliminary and final approval on this project. I see Emily move. I see CJ second. All those in favor of, no.
I just had it a condition to add if it's acceptable to you.
Okay.
They're in negotiations with the city for a maintenance agreement to for a sensor strip on their that's partially on their property and partially on the city's property. And I was asked by transportation to put that in the resolution as a condition before CO. So it would say execution of a maintenance and an easement and agreement with the city of Ithaca for the traffic sensor that is on the applicant's property before CO.
So that to me seems pretty reasonable. Is the applicant opposed to that condition?
I am not. I've already submitted the maintenance agreement to the city engineer, who has forwarded it on to the city attorney already for review.
Great. So if the city wants it and the applicant's fine with it, that to me seems fine. Any further discussion? All right, for real this time. All those in favor of preliminary and final approval on this project? And that is unanimous. You have your approval.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Excited to see this happen. It's a great reuse.
Should start very soon, so
Awesome. Good luck.
thank you.
And that brings us to 430, 444 West State Street, which is the Arnott Realty project. And we'll get that applicant in here.
I just wanted to say that I just received an email from one of the applicants for this project earlier this evening, suggesting that we need to correct their name from Arnott Realty to Arnott Ithaca too, just for the record.
Well, all right. We will get that LLC correct. I'm betting it's the same folks.
Is applicants, is somebody named Lana
Yes.
with you? Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. I think everybody's connected. Applicants, can you just sort of look around the metaphorical room and tell me if the gang's all here?
It looks like we are.
Excellent. Introduce yourselves and take it away, please.
Sure.
No, I'm sorry. It's actually Eric Colbert. I'm borrowing my partner's laptop. We're on vacation.
Sure. Take it away, guys.
Hi, I'm Marissa with Arnott Realty.
Applicants, can you just sort of look around the metaphorical room and tell me if the Eric, I think you've got the
Yeah.
YouTube feed on, so
Yeah.
you need to turn that off for feedback reasons. And take it away, please.
No, I'm sorry. It's actually Eric Colbert. I'm borrowing my partner's laptop. We're on vacation.
Sure. Take it away, guys. Eric, I think you've still got your YouTube feed on.
With Arnott Realty.
Applicants, can you just
You can mute yourself while you're figuring it out if you're not going to speak right away.
How is that?
I think that's fixed. So I understand the applicants have a brief presentation for us before a public hearing and a review of our part 2. We're ready for that presentation.
Great. I'll share my screen.
Good evening. I'm Eric Colbert with Eric Colbert and Associates Architects, and members of the board and the community. I'm really happy to be able to present this project tonight. I live in Washington, but I was born in Ithaca and raised there and attended Cornell University Architecture School. And I still have family there, and it's very exciting for me to have been chosen to work on this fantastic project with the Arnott people. They've really been a great group to work with. So, I know the site in certain respects, historically, where, the State Diner, of course, everyone has gone there many times. And then I can remember the hardware store that used to be in that location. So in terms of the design, there are a couple ideas that we had that the owner has encouraged me and my team to develop. One is to take the piece of the existing buildings that has the most representation in terms of the history of the project and develop on that theme. But let me just point out that, so obviously I'm not currently, a local company, but we are working with all local, the structural MEP engineers and the civil, Tatum is structural, other engineering, and then TG Miller, and then a local landscape company, Tobridge, Wolf, and Michaels, and then Arnott Realty Corporation. So here you can see the site. It's kind of halfway between the Commons and the waterfront. it's a very awkwardly shaped site, and that's kind of consistent with a lot of the projects that we've worked on over the years. Urban sites that are complicated and have a lot of different frontages on different streets and different arrangements with adjacent buildings. What we want to do is it's an urban mixed-use project. So we're capturing some commercial space on the ground floor. That'll be more on the east side. So it's, you know, the side facing the more commercial area of downtown. And then on the west side of the first floor would be our community spaces and building entrance for the residences. And then on the back side would be where we'd be coming in for parking off of West Seneca Street. So we'll have 5,500 square feet of retail and commercial space on the ground floor. And we're structuring that so that if someone wants to come in and put a restaurant there, that would be fine, but it could also be, you know, a hardware store, other kinds of shops. And then one thing that's kind of an interesting comment about this site is that because of the soils, we're not able to do any kind of underground parking, so that we do have some parking on grade 50 spaces that are accessed from West Seneca Street. So this is a colored diagram of our first floor. And as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, it's kind of a purple color. Those are the commercial spaces that we're proposing. And we've structured it so that it could be divided into 3 spaces, or it could be rented as 2 or 1 large space. And then the kind of ochre color on the left-hand side of the document is our community room and other function space. So I'd also like to point out that currently in the existing building, there's a raised area at the corner, an exterior patio kind of thing at the corner of West State Street and North Corn. And so our plan is to lower the whole first floor of the existing building down to grade, and then also the corner outdoor space, so that it creates a much more strong connection between the street and the interior of the building. And the same is true with the frontage of the building. So as I'm sure all of you are familiar with the current condition, where there is some parking in the front of the buildings that are set back. And that's actually a very, you know, there are 2 problems with that. One is that it's not a very urban solution. And then secondly, so we're bringing the building out to the street wall, but another thing that does is it's a very dangerous situation the way it is now, because people have to drive back and forth across the sidewalk. So we're eliminating that public safety concern. This is a diagram of our upper floor showing that the kind of unit mix that we're having. So on the corners and then on the north side are larger units, and then facing West State Street, MLK, we're having some of the more what we call junior bedroom apartments, and then kind of spattered in between that would be the 1 bedroom and 1 bedroom den units. So in terms of the existing conditions, our plan is to do whatever is reasonably possible. And we're going to be showing you some documents that inform you about the conditions of the existing building on the corner that our plans are incorporating into the development. So, and here's the center part of the development, where the bland buildings that have been altered over a period of time are the ones that we're planning on demolishing. Also, you can notice the utility pole in the front. And so another part of our plan is to eliminate that pole, because it basically serves our site, so we can get power from the north side. And here's a picture from the north side. So you can, well, yeah, the parking lots. So basically, this development will create 130 dwelling units on what is now really severely underused land and parking lots, and a lot of the commercial uses are falling into disrepair. So let me just make a couple statements about the existing building on the corner of the Mama Goose building. It's our intention to adaptively reuse the existing brick facades along State and Corn Street and a portion of the wall that extends into the alley on the north side of the building. We feel strongly that retaining the existing character of the structure, we are respecting the neighborhood integrity and building a contextually sensitive project in the West End. We have been working with experts to develop a shoring strategy to stabilize and support the walls. However, as is always a risk with this type of work, we want to acknowledge the possibility that some or all of the brick facades may fail despite our best efforts. The facade is composed of stacked stone foundation built on dirt. You know, here you see some photographs of that. Above grade, the facade is composed of brick that has been warped and eroded due to extensive water damage and freeze and thaw cycles. We are moving forward with the design documents with the expectation that the brick facade will maintain its structural integrity through construction and being integrated into the project. However, based on the feedback we have received, we need to consider the possibility that the structure may be damaged or fail at some point during demolition or construction. Should a portion of the entirety of the facade fail, we would expect to rebuild the brick facade using modern construction practices and materials to build a wall that reasonably mimics the original expression. The overall design and look and feel of the project will not be altered. Rather, the facade would be rebuilt to the best of our ability. We want to reiterate that it is our full intention to adaptively reuse the existing brick facade, and we are working with our consultants to develop a strategy to support and stabilize the wall. We recognize the importance of this component in the project. And so I just wanted to let you know kind of an update of what we're planning with regard to the existing building. So one thing we did when we first started looking at the site was to look at some of the old maps of that land. And one thing that was kind of interesting to us is to see that the original structures were an old foundry and blacksmith shop. And so there wasn't an industrial character that existed historically. So in addition to saving the corner building and adaptively reusing it, our plan is to also carry the theme of the industrial architecture in the new construction. And the way we're doing this is by using, inserting brick components of our facade throughout a larger metal design. And we have pieces like the beam that will extend out above the front entrance of the building, supporting the canopy with a kind of mechanism that you might have seen in some of the older industrial buildings in the area. In the initial meeting we had with the board, there was a comment by one of the members that, so on the corner building, there is a horizontal canopy, and our understanding was that there was a desire to kind of maintain the horizontal line. So we've added a canopy to the components that we have along State MLK Street, and hopefully that will address the concern. There was another comment about there's kind of a setback portion in the middle of the facade, the parts where the brick are, and to make sure that we make a careful emphasis of that, and we plan to continue developing that concept as we move forward. So this is a straight on view looking from the street. We have a 52 high foot building. So our first floor will be, from the first to second floor will be 12 feet. And then the floors above that will be 10 feet in height. And given the depth, you know, in order to do this project economically, we need to use, we were doing a concrete podium with wood construction above that for 4 floors. And given the depth of the wood trusses, it gives us just about enough room to have an adequate ceiling height for the residences. So this gives you, there's a shot of the main entrance of the building. And as I was saying, that one of the industrial characters is the, there's a cable that comes down from the beam that's on the 4th floor that will be supporting the canopy. Another thing is working carefully with our landscape architect to relocate and add on the bike racks, and then do some nice landscaping along State Street that isn't able to exist now because of the curb cuts that go in and out of the property. So this is a view looking from the west facade, looking east from North Corn Street. And as you can see, the expression of the old building will extend around the corner into the alley. We intend to make improvements to the alley. There is actually a bollard in the back of the alley to keep people from driving through, to kind of protect the integrity of this loading area. So one of the concerns of the board after our first meeting was that they wanted to make sure that we weren't forgetting about our north side, that it didn't become the back of the building, so that every place that we had an expression facing a street, that we would enhance that facade. And I think we've done a good job here. We're taking the windows that are there are two different types of windows that we're using in the project. One is the windows that are in the brick facade, which are more detailed. They have more muntins. And then the ones that are in the metal expression are a little more streamlined and plain. So not only do we have the kind of old looking brick, but also there are metal elements that will be integrated into the facade, not only the heads above the windows, but then creating also brick setback panels in the middle of the face of the building on this side. And then because the zoning on the north side is lower, we will have a nice landscape roof deck that'll enhance that side of the building. So here are some pictures looking at that, looking from the north side of to our property, and you can see the back of it, and compare that to what we just showed you. I think that it will be a significant improvement. So the purpose of this diagram is to illustrate one zoning variance that we're requesting.
So I'm actually going to interrupt here. I don't think we need you to walk us through the variant stuff tonight.
Okay.
I think we've gotten an overview last time, and we're not taking
Sure.
action on that tonight anyway.
Okay.
I appreciate the new perspectives you've shown. Those are super helpful for understanding the project.
Great.
Any other sort of new content that you've got would be reasonable. Otherwise, I think that we're ready to move in towards the public hearing.
This plan just shows the proposed bollards that were requested, and I'm not aware of any other new information that we have.
Great, thank you very much. That's a very helpful presentation. Before we get into board feedback on what we just saw, we do have a public hearing, so it's worth getting that taken care of. Is there a motion to open public hearing? I see Mackenzie move. I see Emily second. All those in favor of opening public hearing, please raise your hand. All right, I think that's everyone. So public hearing is now open. Lisa, is there any comment from member of the public?
We did get comments, but I'm not clear that they were asked to be read. I mean, I can read that, but yeah, no, they haven't asked to be read.
Okay.
But we did get comments and they're on your desk.
Great, so hopefully
Yes, they were distributed to everybody, including the applicants this afternoon.
Great.
You're muted. Yeah.
I think we're good. So hopefully everyone has read those comments. With that, I'm going to ask for a motion to close public hearing. Mackenzie moves, Elizabeth seconds. All those in favor? Public hearing is now closed. Great, so now the main action is taken care of for tonight. We do need to review the FEEF, the Full Environmental Assessment Form Part 2. But before we do that, I think it's worth taking a minute, just going around the room and giving the applicant feedback on what we just saw, because there were some new perspectives in there that I don't remember seeing before. Worth checking in on how the board feels about that. Mackenzie, if it's all right with you, I would start with you.
Yeah, happy to. I appreciate those horizontal elements, addition of that. I think that's great, and changes you've made to the north facade. I would request that along Seneca Street, because that's a fairly busy thoroughfare, some kind of pedestrian striping, or maybe even a raised sidewalk at the entrance to the garage, something like that for pedestrian safety. And also, you may or may not be aware of the Tompkins County industrial development agency passing some policy around affordable housing, and just curious if you have an update on that, in part because I'm interested, and I know that the board is interested in whether or not this is going to be there. You'll be offering affordable units, and I've seen some talk of it around town. So I know that people are thinking about it, in part because this is, I would kind of consider this like a sensitive area between the business development district and the new waterfront, and it's near South Side where we have seen a lot of people get priced out. So yeah, and I mean, I can wait for other comments before you respond to that. That's all I got. Thank you. Nice presentation. I think it's a beautiful building.
Thank you.
Garrick?
Yeah, I would just echo McKinsey. I think it's a very nice project. I liked it last month. I like it more this month. I think the changes were improvements. Yeah, thumbs up.
Mitch?
Yeah, I continue to like it. Good infill project. I also have a concern about affordability. I've been talking about that since we saw the plan the first time. That remains critical, I think, for me and for this project, and especially given its location, as Mackenzie pointed out. The other part of it for me, I think there's a serious historic preservation component to this that I don't want to overlook. And I feel, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I have a feeling that the developer is heading towards a version of this project where the Mama Goose building is coming down. And I recognize, you read the statement, Eric, and you're saying that, you're going to do everything you can. And that's what we heard last time. We heard it in the PRC. But I really think it's a different project if you tear the existing building down and you build it back as a modern interpretation. And through your renderings, I noticed that what you're showing does not match the Mama Goose building now. There's incredible articulation of brickwork at the top of the building that exists now that is not on your rendering. There's window borders, masonry window borders that are quite beautiful. And I'm just concerned by it. I have to say that the language that I'm hearing makes me feel like this is something that you're kind of talking a good game, but not necessarily kind of making a commitment to preserving a really great building, part of Ithaca's character, part of State Street's character in this neighborhood. So I would just, I just wanted to express that concern. But again, overall, it's a good investment. It's a great project, and I thank you for bringing it forward.
Emily.
I agree with all of that. I'd like to second and third and fourth the affordability, because this is right within the walking district. And so if you can get any percentage of affordable housing within this beautiful building, I think Ithaca will be a better place for it. It is beautiful. I think, the changes are looking really good. I'm interested in the energy, what percentage of code you're trying to meet, Ithaca Green Building Policy and the energy code. So I'm looking forward to digging into that with you next time as well.
Elizabeth?
I agree with everything said. No additional comments.
CJ?
Same. Thanks.
I'll say that I'll echo the points about affordability. Appreciate the work on the north facade. That seems to be pretty cohesive. I do think when you look at that section of the building from the Corn Street view, because of the way your eye follows the brick, that section of the building seems to float in a way that I'm not sure is entirely successful. And it might be worth looking at that as we move in towards site plan review. And then those junior one bedrooms. This is not a family-friendly unit mix. The biggest slug of this is something, a junior one bedroom is a real estate term. It's not a regulatory term. I have a feeling that if we ran it through the regulatory ringer, they'd show up as studios. And a unit mix that is mostly or plurality studios is not necessarily what we're trying to push for. So look at that. That's something we're going to look at. No units bigger than a 2-bedroom, near as I could tell. That's also something that, that's not great. It's fine. You know, this is a compelling project for other reasons, but that's not a compelling unit mix. And yeah, I think you heard a broad range of perspectives. I think you heard, you know, general support for the project and concerns about some stuff that we still have to hammer out. And I hope that you take those concerns seriously and as we move forward. Does the applicant have a desire to respond to any of the things you just heard from the board? Because you heard a lot. And no is an acceptable answer. Taking this stuff and thinking about it and coming back to us next month is a totally reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, I'll make a couple of quick comments. The first comment relates to the new workforce housing policy of Tompkins County. And Mackenzie, that is something that we are aware of, and it's something that we are researching and working with the IDA and TCAT on. So we expect to have an update on that within the next month, I would say. But it's not something that we're ready to speak finally on just yet. With regard to housing affordability, I think, you know, we agree that it's a concern in Tompkins County. I think that we view our project as adding nearly 130 new housing units to an area that hasn't seen new housing development recently. And so if we believe that, you know, housing affordability is a function of constrained supply and increasing demand, it's our opinion that adding nearly 130 new housing units to the area is a way to address housing affordability. And those are my comments.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Those are, I mean, that's a thoughtful response, and I'm sure we'll dig into some of those other concerns as we move forward.
I'd also like to just comment real quick on Mitch's comments about adaptively reusing the existing brick structure. I want to assure the board that it is our 100% goal to do just that. The purpose of the slides and expressing, showing the conditions of that brick facade was to say, you know, despite somebody's best efforts, it may be unsalvageable. In response to the detail, it is in our renderings. Unfortunately, I think the renderings doesn't show it off as much as real life does, and we can work on those renderings, but that corner is rendered with the intricate brick cornice and the intricate window details that currently exist.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I think it's appropriate to move into our review of the part 2. Looking at the part 2, I'm seeing a bunch of highlights. Lisa, I'm going to ask you what they mean.
These are all things that sort of we need information on, and I've tried to explain it. I haven't updated this in the last 2 weeks, and they have just submitted a bunch of information to me. So basically the highlighted things are just information. I needed more information based on, you know, their application. So they have submitted a lot of things. I will integrate that into this form.
So I'll ask you, Lisa, given that they just submitted a whole bunch of stuff that's not shown here, is this worth reviewing in its current state, or should we punt?
You know, you could or you couldn't. I will have a draft part 3 for you next month, so you could review them together if you would prefer to do it that way. You normally have, you know, a response to everything, whether it has an impact or a large impact or not. So
unless there's objection from the board, I'm going to say we punt on our review of the part 2. We'll have the part 3 next month, and we'll be able to go through both in detail then. Is there any objection? Seeing none. Are there any other? Yes, applicant, Ian.
Just to comment on the plan for next month, I think we were going to try and do design review as well as the part 3 next month. So I'm just wondering whether attempting to do the part 2 and the part 3 and design review is a little bit much to bite off in a single month.
The part 2 might get shortchanged, but all those issues will be brought up in the part 3. So, I mean, I think we'll be able to work through it. I appreciate that concern.
it is a lot, but you will look, you know, the board will look at the part 3 more than one time. So.
So great. I feel pretty comfortable with that. Are there any other things to bring up from behalf of the board or the applicant or the staff? All right. I appreciate the presentation. Glad we got through the public hearing and look forward to moving forward or through next steps next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
And that brings us to Dwyer Dam.
I think this is where I recuse myself.
Okay, you can say your piece.
Yep. I am a Cornell University project manager and work with engineering and project management. In that capacity, I don't stand to gain professionally or financially from the Cornell Dwyer Dam project or any other project before the planning board. That being said, I do plan on recusing myself from comment of the Dwyer Dam project due to my coworkers presenting, and I feel it's better that I don't comment. So I'll leave and someone text me.
Thank you very much. So I'll ask the applicants, is the gang all here? Are we waiting on anyone? And if anyone's trying to speak, I think you're still muted.
Also, please just note that if you've been following along with the live stream, it would be a good idea to make sure that that live stream on the YouTube is turned off so that you don't get feedback. Thank you.
Okay. I think I have my live stream off, and I think I'm sharing my screen.
You are. If you would, please introduce yourself and take it away.
Okay, my name is Tammy Aiken. I'm a project manager for Cornell University. I'm here tonight with Mark Leisner, who I think is on the phone or joining us on Zoom, and Mike Savino, both of the design group. Leslie Schill may also be joining us. And we're all here for you to ask questions to later on in the presentation. So I'm just going to show my slides. I think you guys can see it okay.
And great.
Okay, so this is looking from the east at the bridge. And I'm just going to fly through these. I think Lisa said I can go pretty fast. So the bridge was constructed in 1924. In 1977, there were some repairs which added the granite barriers. In 2016, New York State DOT did their annual inspection and found some corrosion of steel floor beams and flagged the bridge. We've since done structural analysis and confirmed the bridge has adequate capacity and the flag was inactivated. In 2018, New York State DOT re-inspected the bridge, issued another flag, and noted extensive steel corrosion. So while the bridge has been deemed safe for the near term, extensive repairs, replacement are required in the near future. So the university went through a concept design with Labella and decided to rehabilitate the existing bridge, which consists of retaining the existing 10-foot lane. So basically the existing girders and abutments all remain. We're just replacing the superstructure. And that project will retain the existing 10-foot wide lanes, 2-foot shoulders, increase the sidewalk width just slightly, a few inches on each side, add granite curbs to delineate the roadway, replace existing railing with a crash tested 4-rail steel railing system, and from which we're going to be putting in those clear openings, a step ladder deterrent of black powder coated stainless steel mesh. The project will also add means restriction to the south side of the bridge together with surveillance equipment. The construction, in order to mitigate the impacts to pedestrians, vehicles will have to follow the detour plan, which you may have seen in the application packet. Pedestrians will be routed through a temporary 8-foot wide ADA accessible pedestrian bridge. An alternate to the project includes replacing the existing railroad tie stairs from Hoy Road to the Crescent parking lot with precast concrete stair units and landings similar to those used on the stairs from University Ave to the suspension bridge. The project will maintain a usable 6-foot wide stair width with stainless steel railings mounted on the outboard side of the stairs and railings and landings. Lighting will also be upgraded and replaced with LED lighting fixtures and concrete foundations on the west side of the stairs. Project is anticipated to be constructed in 2022 or 2023, depending on the financial situation of the university. In the meantime, we'll be continuing to make repairs as necessary. The project will begin after commencement and be completed in the beginning of October. Some landscaping might remain into October, but the bridge will be back in use. After the project completion, the site will be restored, and we are working with the University Landscape Architect and the Director of Natural Areas to restore the gorge natural areas using native species. So we're having quite a few meetings on that right now. This slide just shows a typical bridge section, and you can see the travel lanes, 10-foot travel lanes, the shoulders, sidewalks, and the guide rails. You'll also see too, the bridge carries significant utilities under the bridge. And so those utilities will remain in service, and the contractor will be required to rehang the utilities with new hangers. There's going to be a few repairs on the utilities too, some re-insulation, some welding of joints, that type of thing. All minor stuff, no new utilities, just all utility repair. And then you can see here on the south side of the bridge, the means restriction. So this means restriction will match more or less some of the means restriction that you see on other bridges on campus. It'll be a black coated stainless steel wire mesh. And here's a rendering of the site, just an overview. You can see the bridge. Nothing really changes about the bridge alignment. For the most part, the granite curbs, the travel lanes are identical. We'll be reconstructing the elevated sidewalk on the west side of the bridge to DOT standards. Also be, just working with ADA accessibility coordinator on curb cuts and accessibility for all of the sidewalk cuts. Tree replacements and natural areas, again, working with landscape architect and Todd Bittner on those landscape plans. And then here, this slide just shows our pedestrian detour during construction. So this isn't final yet. It might shift a little this way or that. We're trying to mitigate any impacts to trees. But we'll have pedestrians crossing over the bridge, all ADA accessible all the way through and meeting back up with the south side of Hoy Road for pedestrians to continue on their way or up the stairs if the stairs are not under construction. If the stairs are under construction, we plan on doing that in the fall after the bridge is open. And then this is my final slide, just shows a rendering of the Dwyer Dam Bridge. So again, from the east side. And you can see here, we've got our transition rails and our guide rails. There was a note in the planning committee meeting that we had last week or the week before about the concrete abutments. So there are some small concrete abutments that are these transition points for the guide rail proper on the bridge. And then these transition rails that are extending on the north side of 366, and then again, a little bit on the south side of Hoy Road. on the west side of the bridge.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that presentation. Before we dive into board feedback, we should probably declare ourselves lead agent and possibly have our public hearing too. But first, is there a motion to declare lead agency on this project? I saw Mackenzie move and Emily second. All those in favor? And I think that's unanimous. So you do have a lead agent. And in the interest of getting through our items, let's go ahead and have our public hearing as well. Is there a motion to open public hearing? Mackenzie so moves, Emily seconds. All those in favor of opening public hearing? Public hearing is now open. Lisa, is there any public comment to be read on this project?
There is no public comment to be read. And Anya, has anybody come since the beginning of the meeting to speak at the public hearing?
No, nobody has indicated that they want to speak. So,
All right. Is there a motion to close public hearing? I saw Emily move. Is there a second? I saw Garrick second. All those in favor of closing public hearing, please raise your hand. Public hearing is now closed. So that's all we have to do on this, but we did just see a nice presentation on what we're looking at, and it would be worth going around the room and giving feedback on what we've seen. CJ, oh, Anya?
could the applicant please stop sharing for just a moment? Because it's hard for me to follow who's doing what with the screen sharing, please. Thank you. Sorry, you may have to pull it back up if they want to see something, but it's just harder for me to see what they're doing.
Figure out how to stop sharing.
CJ, I am going to go ahead and start with you in terms of feedback, if that's all right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so it's looks very similar to the one that's there as far as my limited understanding and visual acuity and discrimination goes. So great. Glad to be replacing it.
Mackenzie.
Yeah, thanks. It looks like a nice bridge. It'll be great to see details of like railings and stuff, but in general, I appreciate keeping up with maintaining important infrastructure and detailing pedestrian access and stuff like that. So far so good for me.
Emily?
Your binder is really comprehensive. I wish every project had this level of information. Thank you so much. I think it's great overall. The getting rid of those granite barriers are going to be wonderful. Having the lower railing with the mesh below is such an upgrade. I think it's great that you're able to provide pedestrian access during construction. And I guess my only question is, the stairs are an alternate. Is that like that might be part of the project, or that's a later phase, or why is it an alternate?
Yes, it's an alternate, and we're all hoping right now it does seem to be within budget. And as long as it's in budget, and when we go out to bid and that budget still exists, we're definitely going to proceed with that. It's been on the list of things to do at Cornell, replace those stairs. They are badly in need of replacement. I can't even say they're even in need of repairs, because they're done.
I run up them, or maybe trip up them often. So, and I see there's extra light fixtures, so that looks great. I hope you have the money to do that project as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mitch?
Looks good. Thanks for the upgrade.
Garrick?
Yeah, so I have, I would just echo what everyone said, especially Emily. I had three comments. The first, by the way, is it's great, and this is a very attractive area. I think it was 2008 or 2010 that whole road was widened and the bike lane was put in, and really it was aesthetically improved. So it's nice to see the bridge follow along. I've always thought this is a very grand and kind of majestic entrance to the university, along the creek and with all the trees and so on. So really like this spot. Along those lines, though, a lot of the pedestrians that are crossing this bridge are grad students coming from Maplewood, and especially have like a lot of foreign students. And I get the sense that if they live in Maplewood and they walk to and from campus over this bridge, that they kind of come in a little bit the back of the university, and so this may be a population of students who don't see so much of the front entrance of the university. And where I'm getting at with this is there an opportunity to deploy some of the great signage that Botanic Gardens has developed elsewhere on campus to kind of hit those graduate students as they're coming onto campus and saying, hey, you're not very far from some really terrific outdoor resources, and here's a map, and here's where you are on this bridge and how it relates to other trails. And in particular, it might be possible to alert people that if they just walk a little bit forward on Hoy Road and then make a left kind of behind the road center, that they can jump right down into the gorge, and that there are maintained trails there. So, just something to look at. I know there's great signage that already exists elsewhere in campus that we could consider. The second thing is those stairs. I had the pleasure of walking up and down those stairs for every single day for 12 years. Agree with all the comments, but I know one thing, I'm conjecturing here a little bit, but when I walked up and down them, I know that in the winter it would get very icy and slippery, and then I think grounds would put a lot of salt out, hopefully, which is great. But then I remember seeing that the steel on the handrails, which are very important, was constantly degrading and corroding. And then I remember grounds coming along every year and painting that black paint on it and so on. So it'd just be great if you could replace the stairs, if they could be replaced with something that didn't require that ongoing maintenance with the salt. I don't know what the options are. Similarly, again, I haven't, I should have gone by. I do recall that when you got to the top of the stairs, it wasn't quite clear as a pedestrian where you'd walk. You kind of end up in that parking lot. If we could look at, I haven't gone back there and looked, but maybe think about, what's the continuation of the pedestrian experience at the top of the stairs if we redo the stairs. So that's the second comment. The third comment is, and this really is unrelated to the project, but if we're going to rip up the whole bridge and reconsider that whole spot, and then I also know that there's been on the Board of Public Works, there's been some looking at the Oak Avenue, Dryden Avenue, Ithaca Road, Cornell Street, that 6-way intersection 1 block away. There's talk about a roundabout there. If we're going to rip out this bridge and we're going to put a roundabout a block away, could we rethink about the signage? And particularly when I'm sure you've all noticed this, but the westbound traffic coming in from Dryden Road. So imagine you're at Cornell Orchards and you're coming down towards this bridge, and that westbound traffic does not have a stop sign as they approach the Hoy Road, Dryden Road intersection. But if you just go out and stand there, about every 4th car stops, despite the fact that there is no stop sign. And then it causes a lot of confusion. And I'm sure you just walk out there and look at it for 10 minutes. I'm sure you've seen it. But since we're ripping all this out, is there something we could do to reduce the confusion there? Where we're taking the signs out anyway, going to replace them. Could we improve on that? So those are my 3 comments.
Those are good comments. Thank you, Garrick. My windows got all jumbled, or my faces got all jumbled some point during that series. Did I get everybody on the board? Did everyone speak? I think so. I'm going to say yes. If you didn't, you should speak. For my piece, I'll echo what everyone said. It's a tidy project. It's an improvement of infrastructure. The materials are comprehensive. I don't think anybody mentioned the native plants. I appreciate the attention to native plants. But yeah, good project. And unless there's other items from the board, or there's areas in which staff wants us to weigh in, or places where the applicant was looking for more feedback, I think that might be it for today. Seeing none of those things. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So once the applicants leave the meeting, I think that will bring us to, oh, my understanding is we did the zoning appeal while I was gone. Is that right? Excellent. Thank you again, Mackenzie.
Yeah.
That makes the gaining on time that much more impressive too. So that brings us to the discussion about the 5th Tuesday. How excited is everybody to have a special meeting on the 5th Tuesday in September? I see Mackenzie raising a hand.
Amidst everyone else shaking their heads no.
Yes.
I actually get excited about fifth Tuesday meetings, but it's because I want it to be our time, board time, for topics other than site plan review. And I feel like we've got some like equity and racial justice topics floating around that it would be really nice to connect with in person. Yeah, I appreciate that applicants want to like get in front of us as much as they can, but I don't feel obligated to reserve. If we agree with special time, I don't feel obligated to reserve it for them. I like it to be for us as a board because we have so many things to plan and discuss outside of site plan review. But that being said, I wouldn't hold anybody to having a fifth Tuesday in September meeting. I'm available, but it's okay if we don't want to do it.
Thanks, Mackenzie.
Do we want to get Elizabeth? Sorry, I just realized she's not.
I just
Yeah.
put her in.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's get her back.
Thank you for reminding me, Mitch. It's late. I'm getting a little foggy.
It's funny. Halfway through, I was like, "Where is she?" Oh, right, she recused herself.
When I was looking to make sure everybody spoke, it made it. I was that much more confused. Elizabeth, are you with us?
I'm here.
Excellent. How excited are you for an extra meeting on a 5th Tuesday in September?
Um,
Fair
Can I
enough.
plead the fifth on that one?
That's a good pun.
It's been on my calendar, so I've been planning on it. I'm super excited.
Okay, good. It has been on my calendar as well. CJ, you were violently shaking your head no.
Violently.
Well, I have a lot of night meetings, just in general, as many of you probably do. But I don't see it. It's usually things that are on my calendar are gospel, so I don't see it. But did we talk about it before? And I just probably forgot to put it in my calendar.
It's just every fifth Tuesday we hold it for a meeting if there's a fifth Tuesday. So there's usually like 3. Not that the board doesn't do other special meetings during the year, but we hold that.
It's a long-standing tradition. Yes.
The tradition.
Exactly. I had forgotten. I had forgotten. Okay. I mean, it's, I could certainly accommodate it. I was sort of being just funny, but yes, I could attend.
I think Elizabeth and CJ are not on the invite. Actually, it may have gone out a long
before. Yeah. Usually the fifth Tuesday meetings are just, or any special meeting really is 2 hours long. It's the limit for the most part.
I'll just put it as a hold, and if we need it, that's cool. And if not, that's cool.
I see the thumbs up from Elizabeth. I appreciate that. Mitch, Garrick, how excited are you guys? That's a communicative shrug and a thumbs up. I'll take it.
Well, I got the BPW meetings too, so like everyone, I'm a little bit meeting out. But having said that, the issues that Mackenzie raised and were discussed, are paramount in importance, and so yeah, I'll be there.
Great. So looks like we are going to do it. We should discuss, what we want to have at that meeting. I heard at least one voice saying no project stuff, and I'm pretty sympathetic to that. Lisa, how much trouble do we get in by not doing project stuff that night?
I mean, it's your call. The agendas are really packed, and I think, my opinion is it could be helpful to take something on to get it off, but it's a never, it's always refills. So I guess it always refills, there's always plenty of projects. Maybe we can wait and make that, like if one project, like Asteri, need it, they need their approvals for a particular reason that is of benefit to the city. If that works out, you could give them, a half an hour or something before you did other business. Could we just hold that as a possibility?
I think as long as we reserve some time for just board discussion of topics outside of site plan review, that's okay. But I mean, it also feels like, do we need to meet with people 2 weeks in a row? Is that what that's kind of what it sounded like maybe some of those applicants want to meet at the regular meeting and at a special meeting, and that feels well, maybe beneficial to their schedule,
Yeah.
unnecessary for us. I don't know.
I think Asteri got behind and then they want to catch up. You know.
CJ, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I was saying two things I was thinking for this kind of non-site plan or non-subdivision or non-action item agenda, I guess that's the way to put it, is if we are really going to get into some kind of traffic analysis on the waterfront, maybe we could talk about helping the city with an application to the Transportation Alternatives Program. They're about to announce this TAP money. ITCTC wants to coordinate applications from Tompkins County and make sure we're all on the same page and moving forward those kinds of analyses. And that money is going to be there, and it's specifically for planning studies, specifically for these types of projects. So the money's there. Maybe we could kind of draft some kind of, help them draft a scope of, you know, or at least put something, you know, together to, you know, kind of give some additional ideas, and then, you know, strongly recommend, please apply for this money, you know, put some staff time towards that. And then, what was the other thing? Oh yeah, this conference center, this letter kind of came out of, to me, a little bit out of left field. Just wondering, you know, what is Common Council thinking something different? Are they concerned about some kind of impact district that they're looking? Do they want us to weigh in on that? Is that what she was saying in her letter? Like, I don't know.
My understanding is this is someone who was opposed before and is opposed now and is taking this opportunity to voice opposition.
And also to
okay, I see,
make a clarification, I think too. I mean, because it is important, I think, for us to understand that Common Council approved the conference center before COVID times, and that there might be an impact. And I am curious in hearing about the contingency plan from the applicant. I don't know that she's just trying to be dissenting.
But could we hear from Tom about this kind of contingency plan about it? And she asked something about weren't they forming a special district as part of that? Do they care? I mean, do they want input from us, or I don't know.
I think it's
already there.
The tourism district tax. I don't think it's already, I think exists. It exists now, but it's going to add expense.
They're going to, add,
to the tax base.
Okay.
But I second that. I second hearing from Tom or the project team about the contingency plan. I mean, I agree that the project before us is the project before us, and that Common Council could reverse their decision to have a conference center if they wanted to. It's not our call, but it would just be good to know, at least for the public too, you know, just like to have that transparent conversation about like what happens to nobody wants a big empty conference center. So
yeah, I think it's fair to have just discussion to kind of have a really fully fleshed out understanding of it, especially, you know, I mean, we're all city taxpayers here, you know, like this is, you know, good to know. I think, you know, if we're going to be covering, you know, whatever the impact is, it's just great to know everyone's still thinking through it, and whatever the case is, just want to make sure everybody's done their due diligence on the post-COVID kind of conference world. That's it.
No, that makes sense. Is that something you were considering for the 5th Tuesday meeting specifically, or something to look at in the context of whenever we look at Asteri?
I was just thinking more generally, and to kind of, you know, without the applicants, you know, it's not really fair in some ways, you know, they're here for site plan approval, you know, to me, it's not necessarily fair to question them on like policy decisions, right? You know, just a kind of chance to have an open conversation.
So you want a conversation, not just a report out or something.
I mean, I guess a way to just engage from like an economic development perspective, to just kind of have you know, just understand that someone's taking a holistic look in this in the kind of post-COVID environment, and that Common Council's briefed on it, that everyone feels like they're making a good decision on it going forward, whatever that is, you know? Does this make sense? I don't know.
Mitch, I see your hand.
My memory is failing me, but isn't this what the presentation with Tom Knight to the board was about, specifically these questions. And if that presentation was recorded, maybe that's something we could all look at again. And I think it answers a lot of these questions from where the city's perspective is. Am I wrong about that?
That's what I remember.
It was definitely about the rationale for the conference center, and it was based on probably extensive research conducted before COVID. And I'm not sure that he addressed very specifically what happens if people aren't traveling or meeting for years to come.
So is
Which
it
I
worth
hope
having an
is, but-
update check-in with Tom? Is that the thing that makes the most sense, or should, you know?
I don't think his position is going to change. I do think he was convincing us based on pre-COVID generated data, and it was a good selling point, but I didn't hear much during his presentation on how their thoughts have changed for post-COVID, other than somebody said people are going to be excited to meet and greet again. And I don't know that that's really scientific, but
Sure.
But Rob, I think your point is well taken, that it's not really in our purview. We should have the conversation, but if common council wants to revisit it, it's kind of their deal.
So I'm not sure in what context to sort of get into that. I'm not sure it's a special Tuesday topic. Maybe it is. And we don't necessarily want to do it with the applicant. And I think that there's reasons for that. And we don't necessarily think that Tom's perspective has probably changed. Although it could be worth having him come back and talk to us again if we want to hear that viewpoint. I don't think he'd begrudge the visit. And I am maybe out of ideas on other ways to tackle that.
Maybe we start with just asking him his thoughts in an email, and like if it seems like his perspective or rationale has changed, or if there's like a lot new information for us to consider, then we could meet. But very likely it's he representing council and the city economic department are going to maintain their case that at least this will be a really valuable future use. So I'd say we can just ask him, like, we got this email from Cynthia. It made us wonder a little bit.
I can ask him to respond to the email as a start, and then you can see where you want to take the conversation from there, depending on what he responds.
I think that's a good first step. I think that makes sense. Pivoting back to the Fifth Tuesday topics, we heard opportunities for funding. We heard focus on racial equity and racial justice. I would add into the mix affordability. And we've heard some resistance to looking at projects during that meeting, and a hypothetical openness to 30 minutes at the top if we really, really need it. I will say that I share that resistance to doing projects at the special meeting. They always need everything. And we've been getting out at reasonable enough times. We've been out by or about 10 each one of these for a while. And that's really as good as it's ever going to get for us. So let's not worry about making it too much better than that, because we won't. But we'll see when we get closer, and I'm sure there'll be some emergency, and we can talk about whether it's real. Any other topics we want to include on that Fifth Tuesday agenda? And we can have a chance, obviously, to review it before then. Mackenzie?
I don't think we have to include it on that for the Fifth Tuesday, but something that I just want to discuss right now, if that's okay. So I'm going to be taking a few months off of parental leave, and I think you all know that. And I'm excited for that time. And also, this is one of the things I will miss during that time. And I want to plan accordingly around two topics. One, I just want to make sure that the rest of the board is going to be able to make quorum. And the months we're talking about are November, December, and probably January. I plan to come back to the real world in early February. The different real world, I guess I should say. So that's one thing. And so I guess we should plan, if people know that they're planning vacations and stuff, maybe we should like talk about that. And the other thing is perhaps it would be wise to have someone prepared to temporarily for those months step up as vice chair, in the case that Rob can't attend a meeting, or if we're still discussing the Rothschild building, so on and so forth. I just want to put those things on the table. And also, this is an assumption that I've made, but my hope is that after my leave ends, I can return to my seat on the board as is and continue my tenure. But Lisa, let me know if that's not true.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you for that heads up. Those are things worth considering. And yeah, we should have another vice chair. I think that the traditional one that we've been using is Garrick, and I don't know how excited you are about that, Garrick, but we could definitely tap you. And if you're not interested, we can look at that.
Sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So just to talk, I just looking ahead to the schedule on December is always so November the meeting schedule is always traditionally the same. We meet on Thanksgiving week, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, but then in December we bring it forward a week, so it's very early, and then January we go back. So just in terms of people's travel and vacation schedules, or whatever.
I think it'll be the 15th. I'm looking at the calendar in December.
It'll be December 15th. It's early in the month. Yeah.
I can commit to making all those meetings. I think it's worth everybody looking at their calendars offline and checking in if you see a conflict, just so we can, be ready in advance.
And is 5 people quorum?
7. It's 4 actually.
4. Okay. Yeah. So there's room. There's room. Someone else isn't.
Yeah, there's, sometimes if the county gives, sometimes there has to be a supermajority. And, we don't have any alternates, and we've always thought about that. That might be something to look into. But if you're interested, some boards have alternates where someone will step in when somebody can't be there.
The only thing with 4 is that then you all have to vote unanimously.
You all have to vote unanimously.
If there's
if
there's any contentiousness, then you definitely want to have 5 or 6.
Good to keep in mind. So we should check in on these via emails. Anya, can you just send out the dates just to confirm so everybody can check against it? You're muted.
Yeah,
I will. I'll put a note. I'll put a calendar invite on for December, because we weren't sure at the beginning of the year, because it's the 22nd, which is kind of close to Christmas, but whatever. But
Sure.
I'll send out for the 15th. I'll put it posted on my, I'm not doing it tonight. I'm sorry. I'm going home.
No, that's fine. So that may settle it for Fifth Tuesday. Something that's not on here, but we definitely said we were going to talk about, is our communications to council vis-a-vis this DOT mess. And yeah, maybe we should just open it up for people who have things to say on that. There was a lot of good things said in the applicant discussion. And I'm not in a position where I can summarize it.
I mean, I think Emily's point was really well taken, that it needs to be decoupled from the approval for that project and for other projects. It needs to be part of a bigger study. I mean, it's so fundamentally basic that needs to happen. And it's just so unfortunate that a state body is holding a city project hostage, a very good project for the city that we've been working on, that the developer is, laying out a huge risk for. And, I think we really need to support that and try to get this thing decoupled, because they shouldn't be related. To Garrick's point, that traffic comes from everywhere, and DOT should know that. I'm sure they do. So I don't know what's really happening here.
Well, it seems like we did decouple it tonight when we struck that condition from the resolution. So what seems relevant for us now would be to push Common Council to approve DOT's plan, which supports the project and also supports further, improvements for all projects, I think. So
or to study I mean, I feel like until there's a comprehensive solution, you know, we're not going to be able to realize the waterfront plan until there's resources put into studying the transportation in
will
that
take
area.
a while, right? I mean, that will take a good amount of time to
It
put
could,
an RFP, a scope, RFP, hire somebody, do meeting, public. That's like a year, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, Mitch, I completely agree. And then we all know that there's more coming. The DOT site itself is going to be developed. And then I know the same folks who did City Harbor have also bought the property all along where, you know, Puddle Dockers is and so on. And so there's more coming.
So there's the idea of saying to Common Council that it's important that this be looked at holistically and not coupled with individual project approvals. And even though we decoupled things tonight, I think we got to make that point. There's a push for holistic study that, like Lisa mentioned, and that I think in some ways is in tension with a push for them to approve the DOT plan. And I think either of those pushes have pluses. The nice push for the DOT plan is that it's a plan and it's actionable in a way that a study is not action. You know, and I could see us coming out for either of those things. I think it's harder to come out for both, but I could imagine that too. And yeah, maybe, yeah, I don't know where the consensus is here yet. Mitch, was that a shrug or a hand?
I would push for the study, not for the proposal.
Okay.
Because who knows if that proposal works or not.
Sure. All right, so we push for study. We talk about the importance of decoupling. What other points do we want to raise?
You're gonna be asked to comment on the proposal anyways, so maybe this could be kind of woven into that, and you'll see all the questions that everybody's asking about the proposal. And I don't know, we could start drafting this I could start with a bullet pointed list, and then we could keep talking about it.
Do you know when we'll see that proposal?
You should have gotten an email today.
Oh, from Deborah?
Debbie, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Didn't read it yet, but I saw it. Okay, good. So maybe that's something that we talk about on the 5th Tuesday. And one of the things that we can recommend to Common Council is that we would be supportive in what CJ was discussing, like seeking funding for this kind of traffic study. We could be partners with Common Council and encourage them to do the study, take some of the work on.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's fairly conciliatory for this kind of thing.
When the mixed use waterfront planning happened, were there traffic projections, like just back of the envelope, order of magnitude type stuff? Given
they didn't,
the
it wasn't
density and given nothing.
There wasn't really a way to know what kind of development. Opening that zoning up to so many different types of development made it hard, I think, to know exactly what we would see. Would it be predominantly residential or medical or offices or retail or what? So
I guess we're starting to get a better handle on it now, right?
Yeah.
Can you forward the email from Deborah to me, please? I can't find it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Is this also holding Carpenter Center up?
Well, they have other things holding them up. They're even more complicated, but that's the same thing. I mean, DOT has said that this is mitigation for the break-in access. I don't think there's a way around that. I mean, they have to approve a break-in access. You know, it has to. DOT staff has said they won't recommend a break-in access without these mitigations. So.
All right. I think next actions might just be to review the draft that Lisa puts together in relation to the proposal. It sounds like we're going to start with a bullet list and work towards something that's more languagey. What will that go out over email, Lisa?
If I do bullet points from what our conversation was?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could start. I mean, I could just get down these ideas there and then you could just keep talking about them and eventually it will turn into, you know, more of a conversation. You can also look at the proposal. I just sent it out to you in case you didn't get it.
Great. Well, I think that makes sense. I think we should engage with the proposal document and engage with what Lisa sends out. And, you know, we'll work towards something that's more defined and we'll send it to council. I think that brings us to reports. I will say as planning board chair, this is another sort of long meeting where I'm impressed at the complexity of what we were able to deal with and the ways we were able to deal with it. You know, in a really weird format. You know, shit was complicated today, and I think we worked through it just fine. So I thank everyone for helping to do that. That it's a non-trivial task. BPW liaison.
Yeah. By the way, Rob, I'd agree with all that, and it was and is a tough issue. BPW main thing is the Hector Street sidewalk. If you haven't looked, that's a major infrastructure addition to the city. So you can now walk, bicycle, whatever, you know, all the way up the sidewalk from downtown to the city-town line. So that's a big improvement. The Brindley Street Bridge is about to come online, and so you know, that bridge has to be also considered in any discussion about Route 13 because that's going to change the patterns. You know, the whole redesign of West State. You know, Tim Logue worked very hard on it. It was all just finished. I think it's great, but the one problem we have is that sort of about the time that thing was finished is when the virus hit, and so I don't think we've really had a real testing of how well, you know, all that worked. As a guy who lives on West Hill, I can tell you, you know, the virus just solved all the traffic problems. You know, we'll have to see when Cornell reopens and all the businesses reopen fully, how things, you know, line up. Last BPW meeting, a lot of over an hour discussion about what happens when someone's water meter fails, and you don't know how much water they used and what to do. And anyway, what bottom line is, conclusion, this is one of these sort of hidden benefits of the virus is, you know, looks like we had some really good discussion. You know, the department is just overwhelmed and people are furloughed and working from home. And you know, in discussion of that, it was revealed that basically if any citizen appeals a water bill or a snow removal fee or anything like that, the current system is that staff has to drop everything they're doing and spend hours and hours and hours, you know, researching the issue and providing paperwork and so on. And it's really interfering with staff's ability to do their job. And so we had a long discussion about trying to move the burden off of staff and onto the applicant or onto the appellant so that staff's not responding to these complaints. And so, you know, we're looking to reform the broader appeal system. It's just too easy for someone to complain, and now in a time of limited resources, just chew up lots and lots of staff time. So anyway, that's where we are, BPW.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Director's report.
Well, I'm glad to say that all of our staff is back at work now. Everybody that was furloughed has been brought back, which is Brian McCracken, the historic preservation planner, Alex Phillips, our planner, and Gino also is brought back, although Megan has taken over the zoning administrator thing. So we're very happy to have everybody back, and we're just gonna take a little bit of a deep breath. So it's good.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Unless there's any other items that a member of the board might like to bring forward, I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn. Is there such a motion? I saw Emily move. I saw Mackenzie second. All in favor of adjournment? And that's unanimous. Thank you guys. Have an excellent evening.
All right, thank you.